Epilepsy warning for flashing lights and colors.
Hey everyone, it's Peter again from Theme Park Crazy, and welcome to another compilation video. This time, I'm going to be compiling all of my dark ride focused videos into one single video. So once again, if you want to listen to it to go to sleep, or you want it as background noise, you can use it. Quick note before we get started, I've linked my Patreon and my Instagram in the description if you want to check those out. My Patreon has a lot of exclusive content on it. And I'll be posting an ad-free version of this video on there. But anyway, you came here for some dark rides, so here you go. Thank you for watching and enjoy. Just like roller coasters, dark rides have been a staple of amusement and theme parks for quite some time. But out of the many dark rides out there, which ones are just plain bad? From the so bad it's good to the so bad it's terrible, here are the top 10 worst dark rides as voted on by the viewers. Number 10, Nile River Tour at Las Vegas, Nevada's Luxor Hotel. For quite some time, Las Vegas has been known for its unique variety of attractions. And of course, what would Vegas be without hotels and casinos? From Caesar's Palace to Excalibur, each hotel has a unique theme and design, and that's certainly no different for the Luxor. This hotel is literally a giant pyramid, and the interior experience is themed to ancient Egypt. Originally opening in 1993, this hotel once had much more pronounced theming. Among its opening day attractions was a boat ride known as the Nile River Tour. While it was mostly meant to transport guests around the inside of the pyramid, early promotional videos promoted it as entertainment rather than just transportation. And there were some dark portions of the ride as well. Some may not consider it a dark ride, but let's be honest, when else am I gonna get to talk about this? This slow-moving boat ride took guests around the inside of the hotel, allowing them to view mock Egyptian murals, mock Egyptian sculptures, more mock Egyptian murals, and even more mock Egyptian murals. And that was pretty much it. Sure, some of the murals had a blacklight effect on them, but the ride's entertainment factor was still extremely low. And although each boat had a tour guide who would give the history behind each mural, this didn't make the ride any more exciting. Imagine the Jungle Cruise, but instead of animatronic animals, the skippers had to talk about a bunch of walls 90% of the time. Inspiration Falls, more like Inspiration Walls. Ooh ah. Now I'm sure this ride has its fans, especially the ones who grew up taking family trips to Vegas. But as a dark ride, this is just lame. Even as a transportation system, it was said to be ineffective, as the lines for it were said to be so long that it was actually quicker to walk to your destination. Some may have fond memories of it, but it wasn't worth writing home about. Number 9. Earthquake the Ride in Gatlinburg, Tennessee. What happens when you take Universal Studios' defunct Earthquake ride and give it 10% of the budget? You get this odd dark ride. Located across the street from Fanny Farkle's Family Fun Parlor is a dark ride that really makes you think. And by that, I mean it makes you think about what kind of brownies the designers were eating. While Universal's version took place in a subway station, Gatlinburg's version takes place in a subway station in a fever dream. Let's do a quick analysis. On the left, we have some random guy laying on a bench next to a bunch of lockers, while on the right, we have a random gorilla inside a wooden crate. The effects on this ride are incredibly cheesy, and it really qualifies it as a so bad it's good ride. You've got effects where the roof caves in and the walls leak, but things get even crazier than that. You've got alligators popping out of sewer pipes, rats running down the walls, rats coming down from the ceiling, and even random spiders, as if earthquakes just weren't spooky enough to make an attraction out of. There's even a part of the ride where the gorilla breaks out of the crate and tries to slap the passengers. And at the end of the ride, the gorilla jump scares passengers from the roof. They could have just called this ride Boo! Haunted Earthquake. There's no doubt this ride's hokey nature and lack of cohesion made it widely disliked by the public, and it's currently among the worst rated Gatlinburg attractions on TripAdvisor. Still though, I gotta say that there's a certain charm to these small-time dark rides. And for a dark ride clearly made on a tight budget, the effects aren't too shabby. If you're ever in the Gatlinburg area, feel free to check this ride out. Number 8. Jurassic Jungle Boat Ride in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. What happens when you take Universal's Jurassic Park River Adventure and give it 10% of the budget? You get this attraction on 2806 Parkway. I've talked about this ride before in my Submechanophobia video, but the ride as a whole is really worth going into. For animatronics fans, you're in luck, because this ride has plenty of them, more than most dark rides out there. Unfortunately, some of them are in pretty bad condition, with one raptor missing an arm and a T-Rex having a dislocated jaw that makes it really hard for me to avoid a Bite of 87 joke. Some of the animatronics are no longer functional, and some of them are just plain horrifying. Quality-wise, it certainly doesn't hold a candle to the ride it's based on, but in all honesty, it's pretty hard not to recommend this attraction. If you're looking for something that gives a chilling, skin-crawling atmosphere, you should really check this ride out. Just look at this pterosaur, this enormous snake, these submerged tentacles, and this thing. So if you feel like giving your kids nightmares, I once again recommend this ride. Number 7. Journey into Your Imagination at Florida's Epcot. While the original Journey into Imagination is considered one of the best dark rides of all time, its successor is considered to be among the worst. First opening in 1983, the original Journey into Imagination took guests on exactly what the name implied. Hosted by the Dreamfinder and his lovable dragon Figment, the ride took guests through a variety of creative and colorful set pieces. To this day, Disney park fans marvel at how advanced and engaging the ride was for its time. However, in the late 90s, Disney executives wanted to update Epcot's attractions, as the park's view of the future from the early 80s had become dated. Though it can easily be argued that Journey into Imagination was timeless as it was, Disney wanted the ride's sponsor Kodak to give it an update. Unfortunately, the photography company had been struggling financially, so the budget they had to work with was extremely small. The resulting attraction would go down in history as one of the worst things Disney was ever involved with, Cars 2 included. This new version of the ride would replace the warm-hearted Dreamfinder with veteran actor Eric Idle. But this wasn't Monty Python level Eric Idle, it was Shrek 3 level Eric Idle. Idle would scan guests at the beginning and tell them up front they have no imagination. After being flat out insulted, passengers make their way through an array of illusions that are more fitting of a Ripley's Believe It or Not museum than Disney World. And the fan favorite Figment? Well, he barely appeared on this ride. Even though he had been a beloved mascot for many years, the best they could do is have him appear in Q-Line videos and as a constellation. Whoop-de-doo. And as if that weren't bad enough, the ride's original theme song One Little Spark was nowhere to be heard. Terrible changes aside, the ride itself felt soulless and dull, and the reception to it was so bad that it closed in less than 3 years. The ride would soon be replaced with Journey into Imagination with Figment. While the new ride was superior, it still didn't hold a candle to the original, and Figment is portrayed more like an Adam Sandler character than his original childlike persona. I remember riding the original in 1998, and then coming back in 2003 and being pissed off, and I'm sure many others felt the same. Number 6. Garfield's Nightmare at Pennsylvania's Kennywood. Once upon a time, there was a beloved dark ride named the Old Mill. First built in 1901, this spooky skeleton-filled water ride was loved by generations of park guests. But in 2004, the ride experience would be drastically changed, as a familiar meme-worthy feline entered the fray. That year, the Old Mill was entirely gutted and replaced with Garfield's Nightmare. This new attraction would take guests inside Garfield's head, bringing them face to face with its worst nightmares. Gone was the simple charm park fans knew and loved, and in its place was a bunch of flat cutouts, a flawed use of 3D glasses, and product placement. Kennywood is well known and loved for having a classic amusement park feel. This made an IP-based ride like Garfield's Nightmare stand out like a hematoma. Despite constant criticism from guests, the ride would stick around for 14 years. For over a decade, park fans practically demanded Kennywood to bring back the nostalgic Old Mill. And finally in 2020, the park would announce the ride's return. In the summer of that year, the new Old Mill would open to the public. The skeletons are back, and Garfield is nowhere to be seen. But don't worry about him. He still made a name for himself as a disturbing internet animation star. Number 5. Haunted Castle Ghost Hunt at England's Ocean Beach Pleasure Park. Located at the base of the historic South Shields Pier, Ocean Beach Pleasure Park seems like a typical beachside amusement park. Its attractions are generally well received by the public, and it's widely considered to be a great place for family fun and fish and chips. However, one attraction in particular is bound to leave dark ride enthusiasts scratching their heads. Despite its haunted castle theme, riders start by boarding what appear to be flying saucers. Each saucer comes with a steering wheel and a laser gun. The steering wheel spins the vehicle on the track, while the laser gun is meant to shoot at targets throughout the ride. However, as far as I can tell, all of the scoreboards have duct tape over them, rendering said laser guns as completely pointless. As for the ride itself, it can best be described as the back room of a party city. Random props are scattered throughout the show building with no cohesion or organization, and the plastic stone backdrop is literally peeling off the wall. The extremely short indoor section is followed by an extremely short outdoor section, with even more random props scattered around. Additionally, there's what appears to be a fish sticks mascot sitting on a bench with what looks to be a severed limb. The whole thing plays out like Uncle Fred's backyard Halloween party, and one has to wonder how quickly they slapped this together. On the other hand, this ride also has its fans. YouTube user The Roller Ghoster, who uploaded this footage, said the following: "There's something special about these old cheesy dark rides for me. I love them. I traveled 4 hours just to ride this one. They are just so much fun to have a ride on. It just goes to show that even the most dreadful dark rides on Earth can still have their fans." Number 4. Brer Rabbit's Burrow at Wales Oakwood Theme Park. Though no longer in operation, this dark ride was unintentionally unnerving. Despite the name, it has little to no relation with the works of Joel Chandler Harris. There's no Brer Fox or Brer Bear, but there are plenty of dead-eyed rabbits. After boarding a train, passengers are whisked away on a journey to Brer Rabbit's Happenin' Place to attend the titular rabbit's house party. And what a party it is. Cakes, breakdancing, pillow fighting, and even alcohol. It was quite a sight to see. And if you thought Splash Mountain was missing scenes of Brer Rabbit getting shit-faced and taking a dump, then whatever floats your boat, I guess. Riders at the time had a mixed response to this attraction. Some regard it as a classic, while others don't look back on it so fondly. Over the years, the ride had deteriorated quite a bit. The music had stopped playing after a while, and many of the animatronics had stopped moving. Plus, the low ceiling made it feel uncomfortably claustrophobic. Some park guests were quite harsh in their criticism. TripAdvisor user Sarah Whaley described the ride as, quote, "a mind-numbingly boring, tired, and unfunny scenic ride with rubbish models of animals preparing and having a party." TripAdvisor user Michelle G described it as, quote, "appalling and not suitable for kids at all." And Jason S said, quote, "I would say that Brer Rabbit's Burrow should be bulldozed into oblivion because it's just wrong on all levels. The animatronics are awful, and mainly broken to the point of more scary looking than things in spooky 3D, and the ones that aren't broken just look like glue-sniffing rabbits." Suffice to say, after years of disrepair, the ride was finally closed in 2013 to make room for a Roald Dahl-themed area. But this ride definitely wasn't forgotten. Years after its closure, the ride gained notoriety online after an abandoned animatronic of a bathing rabbit went viral on TikTok. This image is so cursed in so many ways. And keep in mind, this wasn't taken too long after the ride closed. All I can say is that if you see this image in your nightmares tonight, I apologize. Number 3. Fast and Furious Supercharged at Florida's Universal Studios Orlando. Built on the former spot of the aforementioned Earthquake ride, this attraction is based on the blockbuster Fast and Furious film series. When it was first announced, there was plenty of speculation as to what it would be. Would it be a roller coaster, or an advanced 4D show, or would they simply just port the panoramic 3D movie from Universal Hollywood's Tram Tour? Ultimately, they chose the latter. This ride goes downhill as soon as it starts. After an introduction sequence, the vehicle enters a panoramic screen tunnel, and this is pretty much the entire ride. Sure, the vehicle rocks back and forth, and there's some steam effects, I guess, with some of the most unconvincing CGI since the Glub Gub Galab. I think I pronounced that right. But people expected a lot more than just a ported tram tour experience. This ride is dull, pointless, and completely unimmersive. Unsurprisingly, this attraction proved to be incredibly unpopular with guests. At least Brer Rabbit was the so bad it's good kind of attraction, but this is just so bad it's worth chucking into the nearest scrapyard. Number 2. Superstar Limo at Disney's California Adventure. In the late 90s, former Disney CEO Michael Eisner wanted to build a ride based on Hollywood for the company's newest theme park. Eisner originally envisioned it as a high-speed thrill ride where guests would dodge the paparazzi. However, after Princess Diana died in a limo crash also evading the paparazzi, the proposed attraction had to be significantly changed. Instead of going fast, the ride would move as slow as possible. And instead of escaping the paparazzi, the ride would be focused on a scenic tour through Hollywood. The resulting attraction was insanely cheap and insanely cheesy, with low-quality animatronics of C-list celebrities scattered throughout the ride. The visuals were cheap as well, with flat cutouts making it look like an elementary school play. But this is Disney we're talking about, the king of all dark rides. People expected a lot more from them, and the focus on C-list celebrities made it feel cynical and corporate. The ride was so horribly received by guests that it closed in less than a year. A fitting end for such a cringe-worthy attraction. Number 1. Terminus. Made by an unknown manufacturer. Formerly known as Mousetrap, this ride won my poll in a landslide. But how could a simple fair ride be worse than the cheesy Superstar Limo or the uninspired Fast and Furious? Is the scenery even worse than Haunted Castle Ghost Hunt? Well, to put it bluntly, there is no f***ing scenery. Aside from a light box and some gray hairy thing behind bars, this ride literally takes place in a metal box. Those zombies painted on the ride's facade are incredibly misleading. This ride has about as much to do with zombies as the Heart Attack Grill has as much to do with kale and quinoa salads. What else can I say about this ride except it's a metal box? A metal box, metal walls, you go around and go turn and yeah, all that stuff. I'm not sure how smooth the ride experience is, but as a dark ride, it totally sucks. I'm sorry, it just does. Well, everybody, the Halloween season is here yet again. And what would this time of year be without spooky stuff? This year, I decided to go big with an all-new dark ride list. Today we'll be covering not 10, but 20 of the scariest dark rides out there as voted on by the viewers. But for this video, I'm gonna need some backup. So joining me on this spooktacular adventure is dark ride enthusiast The Carpetbagger, theme park enthusiast Fast Pass Facts, and voice actor / part-time werewolf Jonah Scott. So without further ado, let's get on with the list.
Number 20, Mr. Toad's Wild Ride at California's Disneyland. First opening in 1955, this ride is based on the 1949 animated movie The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad. Both the film and the ride focus on a motor vehicle-obsessed Toad with a habit for reckless driving. Passengers take on the role of Mr. Toad, boarding a newfangled horseless carriage and going on a joyride through England. Best way to sum up this ride would be chaotic. This attraction takes place mostly in the dark with cutout figures brightly illuminated by black light. The vehicles zigzag around the course, narrowly avoiding terrified-looking pedestrians and crashing through several buildings. It all seems like fun and games, but things take a dark turn towards the end. After being found guilty by a judge, Mr. Toad's vehicle will enter a head-on collision with a train, a cartoon explosion is seen, and it is implied that Mr. Toad literally died and went to hell. Yes, you can actually die and go to hell on a Disney ride. The room is even heated to add to the effect. The craziest part is neither the collision nor the hell scene even happen in the movie. This is by far one of the darkest Disney rides out there, and several park guests recall being terrified of it as children. As long as Mr. Toad is going to hell, though, he can at least take Cars 2 down with him.
Number 19. Hollywood Tour at Germany's Fantasy Island. Imagine taking the now defunct Great Movie Ride and making it a lot more disturbing. You'd get this unusual dark ride. Though reportedly closed for good, this attraction first opened in 1990. This ride sent passengers on a boat ride through various famous movies. Although it likely wasn't meant to be scary at first, the ride would heavily decay over the years, making it much more unsettling. Several animatronics populated this ride, with each of them having zombie-looking faces. Tarzan's arm looks like it's coming off his shoulder, Glinda the Good Witch looks like she's having an exorcism, and everyone else looks like lifeless dummies. But the humans are only scratching the surface with this ride. For example, there's the infamous Jaws scene, which was previously discussed in this channel. A deceased-looking fisherman and his boat plunge underwater before two rotting animatronic sharks rise above the surface. This scene has become notorious for triggering submechanophobia, but there's even more than that. Another infamously creepy segment is the giant spider with its filthy-looking fur hanging above the riders. And last, there's the King Kong portion, where the ape's gnarled, nasty-looking fingers chillingly wiggle above the passengers. Over the years, the ride would be heavily criticized for both poor upkeep and its reportedly awful smell. Considering how acclaimed and high quality the rest of the park's rides are, it's no wonder why this one reportedly closed down. Still though, it was an ambitious dark ride that many still remember fondly. Hopefully it'll be replaced with something just as ambitious.
Number 18. The Haunted Castle at California's Santa Cruz Beach Boardwalk. We're going medieval with this one. Built by Florida-based Sally Corporation, the attraction lives up to its name, taking guests through a haunted castle occupied by the living dead. Several animatronic props are scattered throughout the layout, and while the overall tone is darkly humorous, there are quite a few effective scares as well. First you have the common jump scares, such as a bog monster popping out and a sign falling to reveal vicious rats. Then there are the more surreal scares, including a zombie chef cooking a rabbit-like monster alive and a velociraptor randomly appearing in the forest. And then there are the spiders. Ugh. These critters are nasty, and they really do add to the ride's fear factor. You typically don't think of dark rides when you think of boardwalk parks, but this attraction is definitely worth checking out if you visit Santa Cruz. It's got both the charm and high quality Sally is known for.
Number 17. The original Alice in Wonderland at Disneyland. Back when it first opened, this ride was said to be a lot more terrifying. First opening in 1958, this ride is based on the 1951 animated Disney film Alice in Wonderland. The film is often remembered as one of the most surreal and bonkers Disney movies of all time. And to the surprise of no one, the original ride was just as insane. After falling down the rabbit hole, guests are taken through several chaotic and sometimes creepy set pieces. In one scene, the vehicles navigate the flower garden, where dandelions would pop up from the floor and roar at the children. In another scene, the Mad Hatter and the March Hare also pop up from the ground, angrily saying, "Very, very rude." But perhaps the most unsettling section of the ride was the Cheshire Cat. This menacing-looking cutout sported a psychotic grin, with a speaker hole in his mouth. Even worse, he would jump scare passengers from under the stool he was sitting on. To put it bluntly, the technical limitations at the time made this ride much scarier than it is today. Nowadays, colorful animatronics and effects give the ride a much more family-friendly appearance, but the fear factor of the original will always be remembered.
Number 16, Pinocchio's Daring Journey at various Disney parks. Based on the 1940 animated film, this ride retains the movie's abstract and disturbing nature. Unlike Mr. Toad, this ride doesn't stray far from the movie and stays faithful to the story. After watching Pinocchio dancing, things immediately get dark when the villainous Stromboli has trapped Pinocchio in a birdcage. After escaping, guests head to Pleasure Island, where everything seems peaceful, but things aren't all cake and candy for long. This immediately is followed by the film's infamous donkey transformation scene. After once again escaping, guests encounter the scariest part of the ride. Jiminy Cricket warns guests to watch out for Monstro, when suddenly the massive whale pops up from behind the rock to swallow them whole. His design also uses perspective illusions to make it look bigger than it actually is. Fortunately, instead of going to Puppet Hell, Pinocchio managed to escape again and the Blue Fairy revives him. So at the very least, this ride does have a happy ending, but that doesn't mean tons of children haven't been terrified by this ride. With its dark tone, faithfulness to the movie, and engaging set pieces, this is yet another can't-miss Disney ride.
Number 15. Monster Mansion at Six Flags Over Georgia. Now, as a whole, Six Flags is much more well-known for its roller coasters than its dark rides, but one boat ride in Georgia really stands out from the rest of the pack. Partly developed by Disney Imagineers, this slow-moving boat invited guests to a monster picnic. At first, this ride seems like a family-friendly Jim Henson movie. Your boat will be welcomed by a bunch of friendly, furry monsters. A series of gags and humorous moments make up the lighthearted atmosphere. However, within all this, the monsters warn you to stay out of the marsh. And after making a wrong turn, it is clear to see why. Things go from Sesame Street to the Dark Crystal as your boat enters a marsh full of scary, villainous-looking monsters led by an ogre-like pig with a large club. Now, the music and lighting take on an ominous tone as the demonic creatures of the marsh surround your boat. Though you're eventually rescued by the good monsters, the ride still ends on a dark note. Just before returning to the boarding station, you'll enter a large tunnel shaped like a monster's mouth. Not only that, but a truck horn will come out of nowhere to jump scare you. Basically, it's implied that you're eaten alive and doomed to spend eternity in a monster sewage system. In terms of storytelling and character design, this is without a doubt the most engaging Six Flags dark ride out there. Just be aware, though, that it will probably give you and your kids nightmares.
Number 14, Trimper's Haunted House at Maryland's Trimper's Rides. We're heading down to Ocean City, Maryland for this one. Specifically, the landmark amusement park Trimper's Rides. Perhaps its most iconic attraction is Trimper's Haunted House. First opening in 1964, this classic haunted house ride has changed several times over the years. Most notably, a second floor was added in 1988. The dark ride itself combines the cheesy scares of the mid-1900s with more modern ones. From the beginning, you'll be greeted by a headless vampire and board coffin-shaped ride vehicles. Inside the ride building, you'll encounter a number of spooky set pieces. You'll encounter a pirate, a giant rat, skull-headed spiders, and a special guest appearance from Annabelle the doll. Then you'll go through the skeleton mine, a dazzling hallway, and an incredibly iconic segment of the ride. And that's only the first couple of scenes. You'll also tangle with creepy clowns, find yourself surrounded by zombies, maneuver a torture chamber, and come face to face with the devil himself. Suffice to say, it's pretty much all of Halloween condensed into a single ride building, and it is widely celebrated as a classic attraction. Definitely a must-do in the state of Maryland.
Number 13. Ghost Train at England's Blackpool Pleasure Beach. Ghost train rides exist at plenty of amusement parks and carnivals, but this one is widely regarded as an instant classic. Found at the historic Blackpool Pleasure Beach amusement park, this ride is a charming, old-school haunted house ride. The layout features classic haunted house elements, including skeletons, monsters, and a near-miss mirror illusion. While some may say it's more charming than scary, this ride has another frightening element to it that still remains an urban legend. For decades, many have claimed to have supernatural encounters on this ride. These encounters originate from a real-life ghost story that dates all the way back to the 1930s. According to local legend, the ride is haunted by the spirit of one of the ride's original operators, named Cloggy. Named for his habit of wearing clogs, this operator was loved by park fans and workers, and after his death, his spirit continues to haunt the attraction. Several people have reported strange sensations that aren't part of the ride, and some have heard the footsteps of clogs throughout the attraction. The ride was even featured on the British paranormal series Most Haunted in their first season. So not only is this a nostalgic dark ride, but fans of the paranormal may get a kick out of it as well.
Number 12, Black Diamond at Pennsylvania's Knoebels Amusement Park. Unlike the other rides on this list, this ride can also be classified as a roller coaster. Passengers make their way into the Pennsylvania coal mines, where things take a turn for the worst. A possessed-looking miner blows a hole in the wall, releasing evil spirits into the mine. The miners are trapped underground as they are seemingly killed off one by one. The very idea of being stuck in a mine adds to the ride's atmosphere, and by the end, a portal to hell seems to swallow the entire area whole. But perhaps the most eerie thing about this ride is its backstory. Near the end, you'll see a sign that reads Centralia on it. According to history, a mine fire has been burning in Centralia for almost 60 years. The fire led to the area around it becoming a ghost town, and that area is just half an hour away from Knoebels.
Number 11. Ghost Train at England's Fantasy Island. Not to be confused with the park in Skegness, this fantasy island is actually in Weymouth. Despite its small scale and mostly family-friendly attractions, its ghost train is well known among haunted house lovers. There's no real-life ghost story behind this attraction, but the experience as a whole is both unnerving and well put together. Starting off with a lift hill, you'll be greeted by a ghoulish-looking man with his mouth hanging open. Then you'll make your way through several rooms, each separated with an illustrated door. What's especially cool about this ride is how some of the rooms serve as tributes to classic horror franchises. There's a Halloween room with Michael Myers, a Nightmare on Elm Street room with Freddy, an Exorcist room with Reagan, and much more. In addition, this ride has some pretty disturbing imagery. I mean, just look at this bloated, bloody figure that would probably get this video demonetized in color. If that wasn't enough, there's also a spider room. Arachnophobics beware. The amount of content on this ride makes it a fan favorite among dark ride enthusiasts, with some even labeling it as the scariest ghost train ride ever.
Number 10. Revenge of the Mummy at various Universal Studios parks. This ride is just awesome, and it's not just a dark ride, but also doubles as an indoor roller coaster. The ride exists at Universal locations in Florida, Hollywood, and Singapore, but the Florida version is the largest, so we'll be talking about that one. Based on the Mummy film that wasn't a total cluster, the ride starts off in an ancient Egyptian tomb, with the ride vehicles resembling mine carts. Soon you'll pass by a ghastly-looking mummy animatronic, followed by a projection of Imhotep, the villain from the Mummy movie. He invites riders to serve him, and they proceed into a treasure room. He warns that if they refuse, they will savor a more bitter treasure. The cart then seemingly runs into a wall, and a slew of scarab beetles pour out of it. Though it's a mere projection, the accompanying sound effect is sure to give insectophobes the chills. The cart is then launched backwards, dropping down into another room. A turntable effect is used to simulate Imhotep moving the minecart. He then says, "Your souls are mine," and the cart is launched through his skull into a twisting, high-speed course. The train then re-enters the boarding station, or does it? A ride attendant's soul is sucked out by Imhotep, who proceeds to set the ceiling on fire. And yes, that is real fire. One more launch then follows, with Imhotep seemingly being defeated in the process. You're then treated to a humorous scene where Brendan Fraser demands his coffee, before presumably being attacked by a mummy. Or maybe he's just looking into the future and seeing himself star in furry vengeance. All in all, this ride is flat out spectacular. Its intensity, special effects, and terrifying visuals make it among the best attractions at Universal Orlando.
Number 9. Phantom Manor at France's Disneyland Paris. If you're a Disney park fan, you may have heard of the Haunted Mansion. Each rendition is different, and that's certainly the case for Disneyland Paris's Phantom Manor. Unlike the American versions, this one takes park guests to the mining town of Thunder Mesa. The ride tells the story of a man named Henry Ravenswood who once struck gold and founded the prosperous town. After his death in an earthquake, Ravenswood would haunt the town, taking the form of a skull-headed phantom. He even went as far as to kill his daughter's fiancé after she planned to leave the town with him. Even worse, the murder was on his daughter's wedding day, leaving his daughter to wander around the house looking for her fiancé. Henry laughs at his daughter as she goes insane looking for her husband, making this without a doubt the darkest Disney attraction ever conceived. Many also consider it to be one of the best. With its elaborate set pieces, gorgeous animatronics, and powerful storytelling, this has without a doubt become one of the most acclaimed Disney dark rides of all time. It's yet another example of how, despite the occasional train wreck, Disney's theme park attractions are so well regarded in the industry.
Number 8. Harry Potter and the Forbidden Journey at Florida's Islands of Adventure. The Harry Potter films are no stranger to frightening moments. The Screaming Book and Sorcerer's Stone, Aragog in the Chamber of Secrets, and of course the Dementors in Prisoner of Azkaban. One can easily say the series has elements of supernatural horror. And of course, when the Wizarding World of Harry Potter first opened in 2010, its signature attraction was no different. Through the use of a revolutionary robotic arm mechanism, this ride gave guests the illusion they were flying on broomsticks. Several of the film's actors reprised their characters, taking passengers on a flight around Hogwarts Castle. Along the way, they will come across several perilous obstacles, including the Whomping Willow and Draco Malfoy. But things get even scarier than that. Due to the ride system, you really aren't able to see what's coming until it's right in front of you. This is true for scenes involving the Hungarian Horntail, the Dementors, and worst of all, Aragog and his children. There's no doubt that this is the scariest part of the ride. The sheer unpredictability of the robot's arm movements makes it seem like you'll crash right into these critters. As for the ride as a whole, it would widely be acclaimed by park guests and still holds up as a guest favorite. To put it lightly, it's a must-do for all Potterheads.
Number 7. The Lewis and Clark Big Adventure at Oregon's Oaks Amusement Park. This ride was meant to be more educational than scary, but the way it's put together is undoubtedly unsettling. What the park essentially did was gut a more standard haunted house ride and replace it with a ride about Lewis and Clark's famous expedition. For the most part, the ride consists of cutout figures with the dim lighting, making them look somewhat menacing. There was an ominous woman who sat by a fire, rocking back and forth. Then there was a disheveled-looking bald eagle that flies overhead, being lit up by a strobe light. Finally, there was a decayed bear animatronic that looked like something out of Five Nights at Freddy's. All this bear would do was bounce up and down, making loud hydraulic noises as it did so. Just imagine being stuck in the dark with this animatronic. The ride as a whole is widely considered to be so bad it's good by dark ride enthusiasts. CitySearch.com user David Brody described the ride as, quote, creepy in a David Lynch way and probably should be featured in some independent college films. Random, nonsensical, half-broken craziness which can't be expressed in words. Wait, he just did express it in words. Never mind. Sadly, though, this ride would supposedly last operate in 2012. Though it has been mostly forgotten, we are very fortunate to have it documented.
Number 6. The Haunted Mansion at Pennsylvania's Knoebels. What's not to love about Knoebels? Not only is it home to some of the best wooden roller coasters and an amazing selection of food, but it's also home to an excellent haunted house attraction. For just $3, you can experience one of the most beloved haunted house rides of all time. First opening in 1973, this is another dark ride that has evolved over the years. One thing this ride isn't is boring. You'll encounter a variety of jubilant jump scares and some honestly creepy imagery. What in God's name is this anyway? Me personally, that dragon in the clock always makes me jump, even when I know it's coming. Each jump scare is accompanied by a loud whistle or buzzer, which elicits an honest knee-jerk reaction. Even if you've ridden this multiple times, you'll find yourself being startled each ride. What makes this ride even better is the love and care that park officials put into it. The attention to detail is amazing, and there are tons of secrets that you won't notice on just one ride. Even the prop soup has fingers and onions floating in it. Finger onion soup, if you will. Suffice to say, this one is highly recommended.
Number 5. Stillwalk Manor at New Jersey's Casino Pier. You may not have heard of this attraction, but if you're a longtime Jersey Shore Boardwalk fan, it will probably ring a bell. Formerly operating at Casino Pier, this haunted house-style dark ride was not only a classic, but was pretty darn frightening as well. Like other rides of its kind, you go from room to room with props and jump scares scattered throughout the layout. What makes this dark ride stand out, though, is just how disturbing some of the imagery is. For one thing, just imagine this mangled, bat-like creature popping out at you from the darkness. Then, there's this giant spider that hangs menacingly on the wall, surrounded by other smaller spiders. Something about the imagery really stood out from the other haunted house rides, and it was all lovingly put together. But in a cruel twist of fate, this ride would meet a sudden and bitter end in 2012, when it was completely destroyed by Hurricane Sandy. Though the boardwalk would later recover, Stillwalk Manor has yet to be rebuilt. Fortunately, plenty of photos and a few videos still exist of this attraction, so the memories will continue to live on for the foreseeable future.
Number 4. Dinosaur at Disney World's Animal Kingdom. When Animal Kingdom first debuted in 1998, one of the most criticized elements was Dino Land USA. Taking on the appearance of a cheap carnival, the one saving grace of this themed land was Countdown to Extinction. Now known as Dinosaur, this is widely considered to be the scariest Disney dark ride out there. The ride story sends you back to the tail end of the Cretaceous period. Scientists send you on a mission to retrieve an iguanodon before the notorious asteroid strikes. Along the way, you'll encounter some of the most voracious beasts that have ever walked the Earth. Right from the start, the danger is conveyed with an Alioramus shown eating a smaller dinosaur whole. The vehicles rock back and forth as they speed through the prehistoric landscape. The most notorious part of this ride is undoubtedly the Carnotaurus. This demonic-looking dinosaur appears from the darkness and gets fairly close to the ride vehicle, eliciting screams from kids and even some adults. After appearing several times, the Carnotaurus makes a final lunge towards the vehicle as the asteroid hurtles towards Earth. But just before becoming Dino Chow, the vehicle just manages to escape back to the present. The darkness, loud noise, and vicious-looking animatronics on this ride have no doubt given it a reputation as a high-class dark ride for thrill seekers. And with a recent refurbishment, it fortunately isn't likely to close anytime soon.
Number 3, Jurassic Jungle Boat Ride in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. Alright, let's be honest. Dinosaurs are the textbook definition of awesome. Jurassic Park, Land Before Time, Kung Fu Dino Posse, well, maybe not that last one, but still, what's not to love about them? These larger-than-life creatures can be both awe-inspiring and terrifying. The latter is certainly the case for one ride in the resort town of Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. Located right next to Reagan's House of Pancakes, this standalone attraction is yet another slow-moving boat ride. If you love both dinosaurs and animatronics, this ride has plenty of them. Throughout the course of the attraction, your boat will travel through a large, dark room encountering a number of dinosaurs. Of course, there are plenty of voracious raptors and T-Rexes to scare your children, but there are even more unsettling moments. In one scene, your boat will approach a massive pterosaur, who sounds like a dollar store toy that's low on battery. Later on, you'll come across a wall covered in bugs with an enormous snake crawling through it. For you submechanophobiacs out there, you can spot submerged tentacles and an abandoned Allosaurus head sitting stagnant underwater. But perhaps the scariest part of the ride is the ending, where a slack-jawed T-Rex pops out of the wall and roars at you. Once again, this animatronic would fit right at home with Foxy and Chica. Perhaps it was the real culprit behind the bite of '87. Over the years, this ride would decay quite a bit, which arguably made it even scarier. Despite the harsh reviews online, this ride really is worth checking out if you want a bone-chilling dark ride. And if you really feel like giving your kids nightmares, it is a must-do.
Number 2, Snow White's Adventures at Magic Kingdom. This ride is so infamous that many consider it to be even scarier than the extraterrestrial alien encounter. Based on the first feature-length Disney film, this attraction put passengers in Snow White's shoes as she tries to avoid the evil queen. The ride's atmosphere was dark and suspenseful, and the vintage set design made for some horrifying imagery. There were trees with gaping mouths, furniture with horrified expressions, skeletons rotting away in dungeons, and the overall lack of lighting added a certain eerie vibe to all of this. And like with other rides on this list, this one had plenty of jump scares. These mainly involved the evil queen, as she constantly tried to get Snow White to eat the poisoned apple. And when she can't do that, she tries taking out Snow White the old-fashioned way. In the dwarf's diamond mine, the queen tries running over guests with a minecart before dropping a giant diamond on them. the latter plan ending up being a smashing success. A flashing effect appeared after this sequence, representing the diamond crashing down onto Snow White. What's really messed up is that the ride ended right after this, implying that the Queen did in fact kill Snow White. Suffice to say, this didn't happen in the movie. Supposedly, there is a reason why this ride is so terrifying. The story is that Disney Imagineer Claude Coates originally wanted to make the Haunted Mansion much darker, but when Disney went with a more lighter tone, he took out his frustration by making the Snow White ride as scary as possible. Of course, this is not confirmed, but it is at least a plausible explanation. Either way, this defunct ride will live on in infamy for bringing a bucket full of nightmares to the most magical place on Earth.
Number 1. Fata Morgana at the Netherlands Efteling. Efteling is often acclaimed for its great variety of dark rides. Perhaps the most highly rated one of the bunch is Fata Morgana. Based on 1001 Arabian Nights, this ride takes guests on a boat ride through Middle Eastern folklore. This ride is brought to life with 140 animatronics, with tons of well-themed set pieces throughout. After sailing through the jungle and the bustling marketplace, you'll enter the palace, where things take a frightening turn. After a while, you'll enter a torture chamber, with guards forcing prisoners to work the machines. Inside the water is a horrifying animatronic of a prisoner drowning in his cell. But there's even more. Towards the end of the ride, you'll enter the treasure room, where you'll come face to face with the djinn. This towering, deformed monster looms over the passengers, looking right at them. His giant head, bloated earlobes, bushy unibrow, and wide-eyed expression can easily qualify him as nightmare fuel. There's a reason why he's made the thumbnail of this video. He's just plain menacing. And with the worldwide popularity of Efteling, it's no wonder why this ride was ranked number 1. So if you ever find yourself in the Netherlands, head on over to Efteling and give this ride a shot.
Special thanks to all my guest stars for this video, and if you want to check out their channels, I've put links in the description. What's not to love about a good old haunted house ride? These classic attractions take riders through an action-packed course with loads of scares. In my last video, we've discussed incredible haunted house rides like the ones at Knoebels and the Santa Cruz Beach Boardwalk. However, this list will focus on a new set of dark rides, many of which are lesser known. So as voted on by the viewers, here are the top 10 scariest haunted house rides. Number 10. Psychos on the French Fair Circuit. This attraction is only known to have operated in France, including at the annual Foire de Trône in Paris. At first, this ride doesn't seem like much, with a simple mannequin and a laser light display in the beginning. Just around the corner though, you'll come face to face with a buzzsaw. It gets pretty close to the ride vehicle too, with only the cage standing between you and the spinning blade. But that's not the only reason for this cage. As you're passing a coffin, a scare actor in a leather mask will jump out at you with a chainsaw. Sure, it doesn't have the chain on it, but that doesn't mean it won't scare the hell out of you. And as if that weren't bad enough, he'll actually follow your ride vehicle just to troll you. He even makes a second appearance towards the end, doing the exact same thing. As for the rest of the ride, it does have standard props and jump scares, but the use of live actors are what truly makes it special. And let's be honest, wouldn't it be so much fun to get paid to do this? Number 9. House of Horrors at England's Grand Pier. Situated on the shore of the Bristol Channel, the Grand Pier is an indoor amusement park with a large arcade and a spooky dark ride. Unlike most haunted house rides, this one is much more subtle, relying less on jump scares and props and more on giving a creepy, unsettling atmosphere. This is indeed a haunted house ride in the literal sense, taking place inside of a mock house. All throughout the layout, you'll come in contact with apparitions and zombies, with the eerie, quiet atmosphere making the jump scares much more frightening. One can easily argue that the barely lit staircases and hallways are much more terrifying than the ghosts and skeletons. And while it isn't very large, it can certainly be considered one of the creepier dark rides of its kind. You could say it's a more subtle scare fest, and a definite must-do in the area. Number 8. Daemonium from the European Fair Circuit. First debuting at Germany's Oktoberfest, this ride is now a widely known regular at London, England's Hyde Park Winter Wonderland. The best way I can describe this ride is like a nightmare crossed with a dream. Despite the scares, the way it's put together is both surreal and awe-inspiring. The ride starts off with its most unique feature, a large spiral lift with a tower of cages in the middle. You've got a witch, a hunchback, and even a xenomorph. After reaching the top, you'll pass a scare actor in a mask brandishing a chainsaw at you. You'll then pass by several different dioramas, each showcasing a spooky and/or gruesome set piece. Among these are a man being sawed, a torture rack, another guy with a chainsaw, and a bunch of executioners. It's fast-paced, exciting, and strange in the best way. If you can get on this ride, you're in for a unique experience. Number 7. Spøgelsestoget at Denmark's Bakken. I apologize if I pronounced that wrong. To this day, Bakken remains the world's oldest operating amusement park, opening all the way back in 1583. You heard that right. To put that in perspective, this park is older than the eruption of Krakatoa and the voyage of the Mayflower. Just one of this park's many attractions is a haunted house ride named Spøgelsestoget. For the most part, this ride hits all of the classic spooky tropes. A man in an electric chair, a portrait jump scare, and a bunch of twitching, horrifying clowns. These animatronics look just like real people in costumes, and the fact that they suddenly appear from the darkness really adds to the ride's terror factor. One thing that I wasn't able to find footage of was a reported scare actor who grabs your shoulders in the darkness, which you definitely don't see at other parks. Though this feature has reportedly been discontinued, this is still a classic attraction that's widely acclaimed by parkgoers, and it's yet another reason to visit Bakken. Number 6. Shocker on the German fair circuit. Known as a mainstay at the annual Oktoberfest, even the outside of this attraction is memorable. A large demonic head with red, burnt-looking skin greets guests who wish to give it a whirl. As for the inside, this is one bonkers attraction to say the least. To give an idea of how crazy this ride is, one of the first scenes has a deformed demon baby in it, and from there, the insanity only continues. In one segment of the ride, your vehicle will actually run into a few monstrous figures, but perhaps the most notable scene is the electric chair, where a burnt-looking man's eyeballs pop out of his sockets. Sometimes a scare actor will pop out of nowhere to make you jump out of your seat. Other than this, there are plenty other scenes to marvel as well, such as an exorcist tribute, a fluorescent jungle, and even a cannibalistic doctor. It's clear that a lot of time, effort, and love was put into this ride, and it's really worth supporting if you see it. Number 5. The Haunted Mansion at Delaware's Funland Park. While Delaware isn't known for its amusement rides, this one often comes up as a must-visit for dark ride fans. Though the name is fairly orthodox, the ride itself has several unique factors that make it stand out from other haunted house rides. Unlike other rides on this list, this one features suspended cars. This allows for a ride experience similar to Peter Pan's Flight, where your car is more fully immersed in an atmosphere with no track below it. The attention to detail on this ride is fantastic, from the ornate living room to the cave to the nasty spider's lair. And there are even more scenes than that. Not only is there jump scare after jump scare, but there's also a Wolfman cameo and a urinating skeleton. How cool is that? This ride has been drawing in the crowds for over 40 years, and is widely considered to be a state favorite, a true treasure in the state of Delaware. Number 4. Spookorama at New York's Dino's Wonder Wheel. Located on Brooklyn's famous Coney Island, Dino's Wonder Wheel is mostly well known for its titular Ferris wheel. However, there's another classic attraction this park has to offer. Say hello to Spookorama. Sounding like something out of a Rocko's Modern Life episode, this attraction is a classic pretzel dark ride. First opening all the way back in 1955, the ride was recently renovated by Ohio-based Scare Factory Inc. Nowadays, it has some surprisingly ghastly imagery. This apparition is genuinely creepy with its deformed facial features. But that's not all. There's also these enormous hairy bats feasting on human flesh, and 2 ravenous wolves can be seen devouring human organs. There's also some pretty effective jump scares here, popping out at you again, and again. And if you're afraid of skeletons, this ride is a great opportunity to test your mettle. The graphic detail of these animatronics really helps the ride stand out from others on this list, and they can really give the fine folks at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza a run for their money. Number 3. Ghost Train on the European Fair Circuit. Also known to operate at the Foire de Trône, this ride was brought to my attention by YouTube user Diary of a Roller Coaster Girl. Similar to Daemonium, this ride starts with a spiral lift. However, the scares are even more terrifying, from a giant jack-in-the-box to a scare actor swiping a machete at you out of nowhere. Adding to this ride's fear factor is the jolting, abrupt transitions towards the end, taking you from one scare to another at a relentless pace. The use of live actors continues towards the end of the ride, with a masked man in a jail cell. The use of live actors who actually intimidate the passengers make this much more than a standard haunted house ride, and people regularly run from this ride as soon as it ends. And you've got to give those actors credit. Either they're standing in a dark room most of the time, or they have to run back and forth to scare the passengers. But wow, it sure does look fun. Number 2, Psycho Hotel at Austria's Wiener Prater. This one is just terrifying. Located at the historic Wiener Prater, this dark ride took 1 year of planning and 2 years of construction. What makes it different from other haunted house rides is that it's much more brutal. In fact, the park has an age requirement of at least 12 years old to ride it. Rather than focusing on set design, this one consists almost entirely of violently gyrating animatronics coming out of the darkness. One of the most effective animatronics is the one that pops up from behind a portrait. It's just a constant barrage of cadavers and monsters popping out at you on a regular basis. And on top of the animatronics, there's this one screen that shows a man getting his head smashed open like a grape. Loud screams and psychotic laughter fill the ride building, and many consider it the most intense haunted house ride of all time. And perhaps the best part is the ability to buy a souvenir video and show your friends your terrified expressions. Number 1, Terror Castle at England's Breen Theme Park. Located in the county of Somerset, this ride is often labeled as the scariest ghost train out there. From the moment your car goes through the doors, you'll be met with absolute pandemonium. Several animatronics are seen, and the imagery that flashes by is undoubtedly disturbing. Especially the puking guys. That is a grisly and nasty sight. Along the path, you'll see holes in the wall that spell out the word die. Foreboding much? Later on, a corpse rises out of a bloody bathtub, and everything concludes with a cannibalistic woman. Though it's not as long as the other rides on this list, what truly puts this ride over the top is not the sights, but the sounds. Loud sirens and piercing screams blare throughout the ride experience, and they can be known to cause high anxiety among riders. It really just goes to show how powerful a soundtrack can be. In our last video, we talked about famous jump scare moments on roller coasters, but these moments also exist on plenty of dark rides. These scares throw a surprise twist at you, heightening your flight or fight response and giving you a good startle. To tell you the truth, there are so many of these moments on dark rides that there was no way I could include them all on this list. If I left out a dark ride jump scare you were thinking of, feel free to comment it down below. But with that being said, here are the top 10 dark ride jump scares as voted on by the viewers. Number 10. The pop-up ghosts on the Haunted Mansion at various Disney parks. The Haunted Mansion is without a doubt the most famous haunted house ride on Earth. Its blend of dark comedy and genuine scares is brought to life by detailed set design and an array of animatronics. Some of the more famous characters include Madame Leota and the Hatbox Ghost. But for this segment of the list, we'll be talking about a more startling set of characters. Specifically, these guys, known as pop-up ghosts, spring up suddenly from behind the scenery. These ghosts have changed in appearance over the years, sporting a variety of different faces and expressions. They're most famous for their appearance in the cemetery scene, but they have also existed in the attic scene. During the holiday season at California's Disneyland, the mechanisms in the attic are reused for Jack-in-the-Box jump scares, as part of their annual Nightmare Before Christmas re-theme. In the past, these ghosts would scream when popping out, though that was reportedly turned off a few decades ago for unknown reasons. Either way, there's a good chance you were once startled by these guys as a kid, but this is only the beginning of the list. Number 9. The giant rubber duck on the flume at England's Alton Towers. Back in 1981, Alton Towers opened a log flume ride named Whitewater Flume. At the time, it was the longest log flume in the world, measuring at almost 3,000 feet long. Later renamed to just The Flume, the attraction would be sponsored by the Imperial Leather Toiletries Company in 2004. The logs were redesigned to resemble bathtubs, and the flume had a brief dark ride section added to it. First you pass by a bathtub sitting in the darkness with a rubber duck inside. All of a sudden to your right, a giant rubber duck appears with a loud quacking sound. The implication being that he's hopping into your bathtub. Not going to lie, this is one of the most adorable jump scares I've ever seen. Even still though, this duck scared the hell out of people. The fact that it was suddenly lit up in the darkness with a loud noise triggered a natural knee-jerk response. Eventually, the ride was removed from the park in 2015, being replaced with the wooden roller coaster Wicker Man. The whereabouts of this duck are currently unknown, and we here at Theme Park Crazy have been unable to contact him. Number 8. The Were-Rabbit on Wallace and Gromit's Thrill-O-Matic at England's Blackpool Pleasure Beach. Wallace and Gromit are perhaps the most iconic animated British duo of all time. In 2013, these two even got their own ride at Blackpool Pleasure Beach. On Wallace and Gromit's Thrill-O-Matic, guests board vehicles that resemble Wallace's slippers and are taken through several scenes from the shorts and the movie Wallace and Gromit: The Curse of the Were-Rabbit. Towards the end, you'll enter a dark room, and all of a sudden, a large animatronic of the Were-Rabbit appears right next to you with a loud roar. This guy gets pretty close to the ride vehicle too, and there's no doubt he's startled children and adults alike over the years. Almost 10 years later, this ride remains in operation, and it's highly recommended if you're a fan of Wallace and Gromit. Number 7. Thing 1 and Thing 2 on the Cat in the Hat ride at Florida's Islands of Adventure. If you've ever been to Islands of Adventure, you'll know it's home to some of the most modern, state-of-the-art attractions out there. The Cat in the Hat ride isn't one of them. As much as I love this park, this ride is admittedly pretty dated. Its set design isn't much to write home about, and to be honest, it's kind of unsettling. The cat animatronics look like something out of an 80s pizza place, and as for Thing 1 and Thing 2, they're the next subject on this list. At one point, Cat opens up a red box, and all of a sudden, Thing 1 and Thing 2 come sprinting out of it. Their movements are sudden and erratic, which has often taken many passengers by surprise. One hilarious TikTok even has someone screaming in terror at the sight of these guys. I'll put a link to that in the description. Number 6. The Clock Dragon at the Haunted Mansion at Pennsylvania's Knoebels Amusement Park. In addition to their excellent food and superb attractions, this park has a popular haunted house dark ride. Over the years, the park has done an excellent job maintaining this ride. Its props and set pieces are intricately designed as well. Though there are several jump scares on this ride, one in particular is especially famous among dark ride fans. Towards the beginning of the ride, you'll maneuver your way through a haunted house. After spotting a few creepy characters, you'll approach a clock. All of a sudden, a dragon's head pops right out at you. Even those who have ridden this multiple times are often caught off guard by how fast the dragon pops out of the clock. Plenty of time and effort went into this attraction, and it's well deserving of its glowing reputation. Number 5. The Truck on Test Track at Florida's Epcot. Back in 1998, Epcot Center opened their first ever thrill ride, a high-speed, state-of-the-art attraction named Test Track. Despite its high speed and banked turns, this ride is not actually a roller coaster. Instead of running on gravity, the track underneath powers the vehicle all the way through. It's quite literally a giant slot car, and the ride design is known as such. On this ride, you take part in a series of tests meant to measure your vehicle's performance and durability. These tests include handling, temperature, and terrain. Just as a side note, the original pre-show is pretty disturbing when you think about it. After selecting the test that guests will be subjected to, the host tells the technician to pick an extra surprise test. Apparently, she was hell-bent on murdering guests and casually selected a crash test. Pretty off-putting to say the least. When Test Track first opened, it had a much more realistic feel to it, with the layout simulating a roadway. About halfway through the ride, you'll undergo a handling test. Right after turning a corner, a large truck appears right in front of you and honks its horn. Just before colliding head-on with the truck, your car will swerve out of the way at the last moment. In its early years, this ride featured a spark effect on the side, making the swerve much more realistic. Unfortunately, this effect was removed, and this part of the ride isn't as startling as it used to be. In 2012, the ride was rethemed to resemble a more computer-based setting. The truck was given decorative flashing lights, making it look much less realistic than it used to. Don't get me wrong, Test Track is still a great attraction, and it's a blast to zoom down the road at 65 miles per hour. But to me, this jump scare isn't what it used to be. Number 4. The Hungarian Horntail and Aragog double whammy on Harry Potter and the Forbidden Journey at various Universal parks. Talk about a mouthful. Back in 2010, the Wizarding World of Harry Potter breathed new life into Islands of Adventure. Its main attraction on opening day was the revolutionary Harry Potter and the Forbidden Journey. This dark ride uses robotic arm technology to take guests on a magical trip through the grounds of Hogwarts. Along the way, you'll come across the Whomping Willow, the Dementors, and the next moment on this list. At one point, you'll come across Hagrid, who asks if you've seen a dragon around. The erratic movements of the robotic arm make it extremely difficult to see what's coming next. All of a sudden, you'll find yourself right in front of the Hungarian Horntail, who breathes quote-unquote fire at you. And as if this wasn't frightening enough, this scene is immediately followed by another one involving Aragog and his children. These nasty acromantulas hang from the ceiling, and you'll even come face to face with the big guy himself. Unless you're literally Hagrid, you're sure to find this scene disturbing. It's definitely an arachnophobe's worst nightmare, so don't forget to shout Urania Exime. As a whole, this ride is a huge success, and it remains a highly popular attraction. Number 3. The Anglerfish on Finding Nemo's Submarine Voyage at Disneyland. Based on the iconic Pixar film, this attraction is an underwater dark ride. Most of the ride consists of underwater projection screens retelling the movie it's based on. Although there are sadly no underwater animatronics on this ride, there is still a frightening moment for those with submechanophobia. At one point, your submarine will enter the deep dark sea, with a few small lights scattered around. Then, the lights suddenly flash on, showing a vicious-looking group of anglerfish right outside the portholes. Imagine being a little kid and seeing these pop out of nowhere. With their sharp teeth, expressionless eyes, and underwater placement, these figures are arguably more terrifying than some underwater animatronics out there. Since they're not technically animatronics, they haven't qualified for my past submechanophobia videos. Still, it's nice to finally talk about these fish. Number 2. The Evil Queen on Snow White's Enchanted Wish at various Disney parks. In previous videos, we've discussed the jump scares on Magic Kingdom's original Snow White's Adventures ride. While this ride is no longer in operation, there are still dark rides themed to Snow White. These exist in California, Paris, and Tokyo. Fortunately for adrenaline junkies, these rides have a famous jump scare that's arguably as effective as the old ride. After maneuvering more peaceful scenes, you'll enter the Evil Queen's dungeon. At first, it appears as if she is looking at her reflection in the mirror, but the moment she turns around, you'll see that she's actually transformed into the old hag from the movie. This effect is done with a separate figure on the opposite side of the mirror that rotates simultaneously with the hag. It's a genius effect that just goes to show how elaborate Disney Imagineering is. And it's one not to tell your friends about if you want to see their reaction. Number 1. The Carnotaurus finale on Dinosaur at Disney's Animal Kingdom. You wouldn't think a Disney attraction would be one of the most intense and terrifying dark rides out there, but Dinosaur fits that bill perfectly. Originally opening as Countdown to Extinction, this ride takes guests on a heart-pounding quest to bring an iguanodon to the present day. Unfortunately, you've landed just at the end of the Cretaceous period, when the asteroid is just about to hit the Yucatan Peninsula. The layout is jam-packed with advanced dinosaur animatronics, with the most impressive of the bunch being the Carnotaurus. This dinosaur mixed with the devil has been horrifying park guests for years, but it's his final appearance on the ride that makes this list. Towards the end of the experience, the asteroid is just seconds away from striking the Earth, with no Bruce Willis in sight. All of a sudden, the Carnotaurus comes charging right towards guests, racing towards the vehicle head-on. A strobe light adds to the scene's intensity, as does the alarm sound. The positioning of the Carnotaurus right above the drop also gives the illusion you're about to crash into it. Overall, this is a memorable, terrifying, and startling jump scare you can only experience at Disney's Animal Kingdom. Hey everyone, it's Peter from Theme Park Crazy, back again with another unscripted video. Now for those of you who have missed my recent community post, I'm currently working on a video about the 10 most disturbing dark rides. Some of these dark rides I've discussed before, but most of them I haven't. And one of these dark rides that I haven't discussed before is called The Mine of Lost Souls at Canobie Lake Park in New Hampshire. By the way, I will link the finalists in the description. I have narrowed this poll down to 10, and those finalists will be in the description if you want to either change your vote or vote if you haven't voted before. I'll link the poll in the description. But for this particular ride, The Mine of Lost Souls, I started writing a segment about it for the video, and it just went on and on and on because I had so much to say about this ride. And to be honest, this ride is probably the most bizarre dark ride I have ever seen. Now, I have been to Canobie Lake Park before. I went all the way back in 2017, but I was more focused on roller coasters at the time. My channel mainly focused on roller coasters, so I didn't bother riding it, and I really should have. But right now, I want to discuss this ride and walk you through it, because honestly, I'm not sure what the designers were thinking when they made it, and I don't mean that in a bad way. This is a solid looking dark ride, but I don't think I was prepared for how just insane this thing is. Now, whether or not it's the most disturbing dark ride of the 10 in the poll, I mean, that's up to you. I don't want you to think that just because I'm giving this ride its own video, it's the most disturbing of the bunch, but it's definitely, I think, the strangest. So first of all, there's the backstory behind it, which they do have a sign giving you the story. Now, according to the backstory, these two brothers, and I'm assuming they're brothers because they have the same last name, Billy and Bobby Hollander. So these two brothers go into a cavern in New Hampshire, they find gold, and this starts an all-new mining company called the Policy Mining Company. So a few years later, the two boys go missing in the cavern, and a legend starts about how if you go deep into the cavern, you'll come across the Grim Reaper who will take your soul. Now, I'm not sure why the Grim Reaper is hanging around in a cavern. I mean, if I was the Grim Reaper, I would be hanging around in Florida. I mean, tons of older tourists and retirees there, sunshine beaches, theme parks. I mean, if I was the Grim Reaper, I would be living in Florida. But I guess this Grim Reaper doesn't really care about that. He just wants to live in a cold, dark cavern. Anyway, so that's the story. You're gonna go toe-to-toe with the Grim Reaper and escape his clutches, and it seems simple, but this ride, it's much crazier than that. So starting off, you get in this minecart, which holds 4 people, and you start off the ride, and immediately you're met with this animatronic miner who's basically welcoming you to the mine. I can't talk. And he's telling his coworker, who is about to blast a hole in the mine, to not blast that hole, not to blow anything up yet, because there's friends and all here. And so the coworker is like, what did you say? And the miner's like, there's friends and all here. And the coworker is like, oh, all clear. That's funny, I'll admit. So they blow the hole in the mine, and a boulder almost comes down and crushes the minecart. And there's this cool little detail on this boulder. If you look closely, you could see 2 glow-in-the-dark handprints on this boulder. I don't know if this was accidental, like one of the designers accidentally got glow-in-the-dark paint on his hands and touched the boulder, but there's also a chance that this represents somebody was previously crushed by this boulder and tried to stop it with their hands. So if that's the case, this is a cool little feature. Moving on, you then enter the mine, and there's this cheerful song playing in the background, this cheerful, like, country folk song playing in the background, and it sounds cheerful.
Way down in the mine, 1 strike, 2 strikes, 3 strikes, 4. Lift that pig and strike that Oregon.
But if you really listen to the lyrics, there's something that sticks out. There's a lyric that says,
See that man's waterfall, the devil waits for you to call. A demon's working after all.
Now, a lot of people may not be listening to the song at this point, but this is some pretty clever foreshadowing. So, aside from the song, once you enter the mine, you'll see a few animatronics, a few animatronic miners. The first of which is operating, I'm not sure what this is, I think it's some kind of coal-powered furnace with a whistle on top. I'm not sure what the purpose of this is. I don't really know anything about mining, if you want to comment down below. But after this, you'll see a man in a minecart come out towards your vehicle. And this isn't really a jump scare because you can see him from pretty far away. But his face, something about his face is really unsettling. I don't know how old these figures are, but the face that this miner has, it gives a kind of an ominous feeling. So then, on your right, you'll see another miner playing chess with a skeleton. Now, this miner is apparently named Jasper, and he refers to the skeleton as Jake. So, I'm gonna guess that this is like some dark humor, as in Jake waited so long for Jasper to make his move that Jake literally starved to death and died and turned into a skeleton. So at this point, the ride seems to be using dark humor to kind of transition you into the more spooky segments. And this is followed by a demented-looking smiling miner holding a stick of dynamite who apparently blows himself up. Now, I don't know if he accidentally blew himself up or if the Grim Reaper or the devil possessed him to blow himself up, but either way, some more dark humor. And not coincidentally enough, right after this, you'll come across the waterfall that the song referred to, and the waterfall opens up, you go through it. So after going through the waterfall, you'll see a jump scare of flashing eyes on a skull on the wall. Basically the Grim Reaper telling you, you're in my territory now. After this, you'll go through some rocks, and a miner will be there telling you, don't go any further, don't go here. And then there's this really cool Pepper's Ghost effect, and with this, the miner apparently turns into the Grim Reaper. Now, it's unknown if the Grim Reaper was disguising himself as this miner, or if the Grim Reaper stole the miner's soul right then and there. But the Grim Reaper says, it's too late to back out, you're mine now. So then you come across this bloody looking door and you enter a mausoleum. And you can tell because of the slots on the wall. And you can also see a miner lowering in a fresh casket. But you can see one of the drawers on the wall, you could see two skeleton arms reaching up to grab the casket. Now, I don't know if the skeleton is trying to help lower the casket into the mausoleum. In that case, he's a pretty helpful skeleton. But after this, you get sort of like a plot twist where you actually see the tomb of the aforementioned Hollander brothers. And their ghosts appear in the tomb and basically evilly laugh and say, we have new friends to play with. Now, at this point, my question is, why are they suddenly evil? Are they working with the Grim Reaper to capture souls? Or is this an illusion from the Grim Reaper? And also, there's a skeleton chained to the wall. So this is apparently a dungeon. So why was somebody being held in that dungeon? Who was chained to the wall? And why were they chained to the wall? This is pretty much up to interpretation. But here's where things get crazy. Here's where things get weird. All of a sudden, without any warning or indication, you're inside of a tomb in ancient Egypt. There's a death mask on the wall that says you're in the Valley of the Doomed and to beware the Pharaoh's curse. I was under the impression that we were supposed to be in a mine in New Hampshire. What does ancient Egypt have to do with New Hampshire? Unless there are pyramids in New Hampshire that I'm unaware of. If you're from New Hampshire, feel free to comment down below. And you turn around and suddenly there's a mummy and there's two cobras and the mummy is evilly laughing at you, bursting out of his sarcophagus. And after this, you go back to the mine. There's no mention of why you're in ancient Egypt. It just comes and goes. Suddenly you're in Egypt and suddenly you're not. So once you're back in the mine, you find the lost souls that the title of the ride mentioned. Now these souls are all over the walls, and honestly, this is a very creepy visual. Now, these don't look like human faces. They look like mummified emojis with eyeballs, some without. Honestly, you might get hungry looking at these because they kind of look like the McCain smiley face fries that you get at the grocery store. But obviously, they're not smiling. They're shocked and frightened because they're lost souls. So there's a bunch of lost souls behind bars, and then the Grim Reaper pops up and jump scares you. Then you turn around and there's even more souls on the wall, and for some reason there is a swordsman who kind of looks like a pirate. Now, this swordsman is headless, and he is apparently holding his own head, and his head is alive and it's laughing. Also, there's two other heads next to him, so apparently he chopped their heads off and then he chopped his own head off. Now, my only question is, why did he chop his own head off? Now, I'm assuming that the Grim Reaper made him do this, just like the Grim Reaper made that miner at the beginning blow himself up. But overall, this is just another crazy moment that really doesn't really have anything to do with the ride. Why is there a swordsman in a mine? Why is there a pirate in this mine? And before anyone can answer that, the Grim Reaper apparently decides to blow up the mine. There's a bunch of explosives, he lights them, there's an explosion, the roof caves in. And apparently you survive all this because then the ride just ends. Overall, this ride is just a strange but very interesting experience. The best way I can describe it is that it's like a bad dream where you go from one place to another where things start to really not make sense. but there's still an overall theme of danger with disturbing visuals. And the fact that it takes place underground gives it kind of a claustrophobic feeling that works to its advantage, because it adds to the danger. But yeah, this is the kind of bad dream that you would get from A, eating chocolate before bed, or B, your AC not really working that well and you having to sleep in the heat. Now, I know that this ride was made by the famous Sally Dark Rides, who have made some of the top dark rides in the industry. I mean, aside from Disney and Universal, Sally is pretty much the top of the dark rides food chain. And by the end of this dark ride, you're pretty much left with more questions than answers. If it was meant to be like a bad dream, then definitely mission accomplished. But if not, then I'm really wondering where the whole ancient Egypt scenario came from. I'm wondering who thought of the swordsman in the mine. And who thought up the plot? Like, was there behind the scenes storyboard session of what they wanted to do with this ride? Or did they just kind of have fun with it and do whatever? For this reason, for all these reasons, this is probably the most fascinating dark ride I've seen. Like, there's so much mystery behind it. There's so many questions that are unanswered. And apparently, fittingly enough, Stephen King, the famous author Stephen King, actually rode this ride and used it and Canopy Lake Park as a whole as inspiration for his book Joyland. And this is especially fitting because if you're aware of the works of Stephen King, this is basically like a Stephen King book, this whole ride. You've got some genuinely disturbing moments mixed in with some bizarre moments that seem to come out of left field. This ride is basically a Stephen King dark ride, and that is just awesome. Now, if you know anything about the story behind this ride, or if you have any sources about its development, feel free to let me know in the comments below. We've talked about dark rides a few times on this channel, but they're certainly worth having more videos about them. The way I see it, you can't have a complete theme park experience without at least one dark ride, some of which are just downright disturbing. From dilapidated animatronics to walls covered in chewed gum, here are the top 10 disturbing dark rides as voted on by the fans. Number 10, the E.T. Adventure at Universal Studios Orlando and Universal Studios Japan. Now you may be thinking, hang on a moment, how can E.T. be disturbing? Isn't that a family ride? Well, yes, this isn't intended to be a scary ride, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have anything disturbing in it. At first, this ride doesn't seem like anything that unorthodox. Just going through the story beats of the movie and evading the authorities to get E.T. to his ship. But where the movie ended with E.T. going back to his home planet, this ride actually takes you there. As it turns out, there are other types of aliens there, and some of them are pretty off-putting. Now, none of this is to knock on the designers. These models are extremely creative. Still though, look at this mushroom alien with multiple eyes. Then there's this one named Tickly Moot Moot. Is it just me, or does it resemble a demonic tumor? There were multiple ones of this design. They look like what would happen if Carrot Top fell into a nuclear reactor. Then there's this character named Magdoll. This looks like something that Sid from Toy Story would create. Though charming to many, this ride is definitely a trip. And others do honestly find it kind of creepy. To put it simply, if they ever make a sequel to Pineapple Express, it should take place on this planet. Number 9, the flooded mine at Missouri's Silver Dollar City. This is another case where it's not meant to be a horror ride, but it's still unsettling in its own way. On this interactive dark ride, you'll head deep into the heart of a prison mine. But this isn't an ordinary mine, as it's filling up rapidly with water. Throughout the layout are targets, which passengers can take aim at and trigger a number of effects throughout the course. This ride is extremely fun, though there are a few elements to make it worthy of this list. The main thing that's creepy about this ride is the array of animatronics and mannequins. These guys are spread out throughout the ride, and some of them even move. Perhaps the most notable one is this guy turning a crank. Though his design has changed over the years, he still remains a top-tier generator of submechanophobia. His twisted grin and wide-eyed stare, combined with his gnarled, nasty hand, are enough to unsettle even those who don't have submechanophobia. These animatronics may not have the polish of Disney or Universal, but what they lack in detail, they more than make up for in fear factor. The setting itself is also pretty ominous, with the looming threat of a flood adding a layer of danger to the already claustrophobic mine scenario. If submerged man-made objects freak you out, you may want to think twice before stepping foot on this ride. But for those brave enough to take on the challenge, the Flooded Mine is a guest favorite for a reason. Number 8. The Mine of Lost Souls at New Hampshire's Canobie Lake Park. This relatively small amusement park is known for its wide variety of attractions. The thrill rides, family rides, food, and even the architecture are enough to have it stand out as a memorable experience. One attraction you certainly won't forget is a dark ride named the Mine of Lost Souls. If you think you've seen it all, think again. This ride is like stepping into the kind of twisted dream you get after eating a pound of chocolate before bed. The backstory centers on two boys named Billy and Bobby Hollander who stumble upon a gold mine in a cavern, kickstarting a whole mining operation. A few years later, the brothers go missing in the mine. This sparks rumors of the Grim Reaper lurking in the depths, ready to claim unsuspecting souls. On this ride, guests board 4-person mine carts and are taken down into the mine. Here, the ride takes a darkly humorous tone. First, you'll spot a miner named Jasper playing chess with a skeleton named Jake, the implication being that Jake died waiting for Jasper to make his move. Then, a demented-looking miner accidentally blows himself up with dynamite, thinking it's a candle. This dark humor serves as a transition to the next part of the ride, where things get spooky and weird. After passing through a waterfall and through some rocks, guests enter the territory of the Grim Reaper. Soon you'll find yourself in a crypt, where you come face to face with the evil ghosts of the Hollander brothers. Then, without warning, you're suddenly in ancient Egypt. With mummies, a death mask, and 2 cobras, this ride takes a detour into the bizarre. Turning the corner is perhaps the creepiest visual, when guests find the lost souls the ride's title referred to. These creepy, distorted faces on the wall resemble mummified emojis, and it's here that you'll be jump scared by the Grim Reaper. Then there's this disturbing visual of a headless swordsman who apparently works with the Grim Reaper. His story is unknown. After narrowly avoiding being blown up and the roof caving in, you'll escape the mine. Unless the implication is that you died. Either way, there's a certain charm to this madness. It really is like a bad dream emulator, with each scene adding to the intrigue with solid animatronic and set design. Overall, the imagery and atmosphere as a whole make this ride well worth checking out. Number 7. The Big Red Car Ride at Australia's Dreamworld. You may be wondering how an Australian children's music group could be associated with anything disturbing. Well, buckle up because you're about to find out why. Recently closing a few years ago, this attraction was a trackless dark ride based on The Wiggles. It promised to take guests into the universe of the worldwide sensation, but due to budget and technical constraints, the ride was severely flawed. Over time, it became perhaps the most unintentionally disturbing family ride ever built. The ride started off with guests boarding the Wiggles' Big Red Car. They would then be taken through several set pieces inspired by the Wiggles TV show. Now, the ride itself was quite underwhelming, at least by today's standards. The sets felt big and empty, and not only that, but the Wiggles only appear on small television screens that you're more likely to find at a Goodwill than in a major theme park. What's disturbing about this ride is that over time, the ride's effects deteriorated, and oftentimes, rooms would fail to light up properly. Even when the lights did function correctly, you would still see dark rooms with large empty spaces in the distance. Just look at this image. Add a black and white filter, some static, and some text, and you've got a scene straight out of an analog horror. Then there are these awkward moments that do feature quote-unquote animatronics. I say quote-unquote because they barely move. They just have a constant blank expression with only one pose, and with the lack of proper lighting, they look especially unsettling. It also doesn't help that the ride literally moves slower than some species of ants. The ride wasn't that bad when it first opened, but over time, it became less and less appealing. Eventually, the decision was made to close it down in 2020, but if it was still around, they could make it into a great horror ride. Number 6. Horror House at China's Xinjiang Action Park. Admittedly, there's not a whole lot to say about this ride, because its inception, development, and overall history is pretty much unknown. One thing we do know is that notable coaster enthusiast David J. Ellis and the late great Cyclone Steve got footage of this ride in 2011. This dark ride appears to take place in a haunted house, with the sounds of psychotic laughter and terrified screams echoing throughout. As for the imagery, it's quite demonic and disturbing. There's a body hanging from the ceiling, a faceless cloaked figure, a devil's face on the wall, and an Iron Maiden. No, not that Iron Maiden. There we go. The most unnerving moment comes when you approach what appears to be a woman with no clothes on. The lights flash on and off as you approach, adding a sense of uncertainty and dread. What's going to happen? What's going to pop out? Well, unfortunately, I don't think I can show it on this channel due to YouTube's content policies, but it is pretty gruesome. I'll put a link in the description if you're interested. Let's just say that what you see is skinless, but not boneless. Believe it or not though, this scare was actually used from an old dark ride named Phantasmagoria from Tulsa, Oklahoma's Bell's Amusement Park. Either way though, it was an extremely effective scare and almost guaranteed to give kids nightmares. Oh, and by the way, there's also a witch in a bikini for some reason. No comment. Number 5. Devil's Den at Pennsylvania's Conneaut Lake Park. We've seen dark rides with disturbing imagery and props make the list, but what about a dark ride that's just plain gross? As of right now, I'm not sure what the fate of this ride is. However, I'm not going to get into the controversy surrounding this park and its most recent owner, as that's a whole nother can of worms. For now, I'll just be discussing what made Devil's Den qualify for this list. Admittedly, this ride is a pretty standard pretzel dark ride / debatable roller coaster, with hairpin turns and scares scattered throughout. So what gave this ride the distinction of being disturbing? The walls. Yes, the walls. That's not paint you're looking at, that's chewed gum. As it turns out, officials didn't bother scraping people's chewed gum off the walls. And even worse, they actually encouraged people to stick it on. There was even a sign that advertised the quote-unquote infamous gum wall. I understand that there are some people out there who may have fond memories of contributing to this wall, and I won't judge. Still though, this is something you would not see at Disney World. Can you imagine Peter Pan's flight featuring the infamous gum wall? Now, I'm not sure how this got past the health inspections, but, I don't know, some things just don't have answers. Number 4, Tales of the Okefenokee at Six Flags Over Georgia. Believe it or not, the original Splash Mountain wasn't the first water ride based on the works of Joel Chandler Harris. Back in 1967, Six Flags Over Georgia debuted a dark ride based on the tales of Brer Rabbit. Initially, it was criticized for its underwhelming set designs, but the next year, it received a makeover from famous Canadian puppeteers Sid and Marty Krofft. The revitalized version used state-of-the-art animatronics to tell the story of Brer Fox and Brer Bear trying to capture Brer Rabbit. At the time, these animatronics were incredibly advanced, but by today's standards, many of them are undoubtedly nightmare fuel. For some reason, these rabbits look like they're about to murder you in your sleep. It probably has something to do with the wide-eyed smiling expressions and unnatural movements. Then you have these yassified singing carrots who look really out of place. Why do the vegetables in this world wear makeup? Then there's these Brer Bear and Brer Fox animatronics who sit in the water as one of the earliest examples of submechanophobia. Not to mention that Brer Bear's eyes could apparently roll into the back of his head. I mean, who does he think he is, the Undertaker? Here's the thing about this ride. From a design standpoint, it's clear that a lot of earnest time and effort was put into it, with its strong storytelling, elaborate set design, and immersion. With the limits of animatronic technology at the time though, these figures look extremely robotic, making the footage of it arguably unsettling to watch. Over the years, the attraction's condition deteriorated due to vandalism and overall wear and tear. By 1980, the decision was made to replace it with a new ride. This replacement, named Monster Plantation, featured a new story involving a world of monsters. Today, this ride continues to operate as Monster Mansion, and while it too has disturbing moments, it can be argued that the original ride's early technology made it much more unsettling. Number 3, Jurassic Jungle Boat Ride at Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. We've talked about this ride a few times before, but I just had to include it here. How could I not? One thing I haven't brought up before is the queue. What they did was place mannequins outside of the boarding station to make it look like there are always people there. Close up, these rubber figures are extremely disturbing looking. It's speculated that these mannequins are there so that people driving by are more likely to visit. This process, known as social proof, likely uses a simulated crowd to create the perception that the attraction is popular and worth visiting. As for the ride itself, it was in terrible condition in the late 2010s. Many of the animatronics were worn out and poorly maintained, leading to some truly grisly visuals. In 2018, YouTube user The Carpetbagger took a ride on this attraction, and gave us one of the most disturbing POVs of all time. Highlights from the time included the following. First, there's this bizarre naked mole rat thing that's a knockoff of an inflatable maze called the Creature. Right afterwards, you'll find submerged tentacles, a dilapidated T-Rex head with exposed mechanics, a dinosaur with a missing right arm, and a massive worn-out looking pterosaur that makes whatever this sound is. Truly the perfect imitation of a dollar store toy with low batteries after being left out in the rain. Afterwards, there's this masterpiece of Submechanophobia, which has been stagnant in the water ever since it ceased operation about a decade ago. Now, believe it or not, we do have some answers as to what this looks like out of the water. Apparently, this is an Allosaurus animatronic from an Ohio-based company named the Scare Factory Inc. According to news outlets, this company has been highly criticized for allegedly not delivering products after payment, with the Ohio Attorney General's office receiving 5 complaints for undelivered products totaling $75,000. You could argue that this figure is lucky to even be sitting in the water in the first place. But that's not all for this ride. You've also got a giant scorpion, giant insects and arachnids, a giant snake coiling through the wall, and to top it all off, the famous slack-jawed T-Rex who likely caused the bite of 87 million BC. Interestingly enough though, since this POV was taken, the ride has updated a few of its animatronics, with many being freshly made and the more worn out looking ones being removed. Honestly though, this is actually kinda disappointing to me, as the worn out animatronics gave this ride a whole nother level of terror. Still, it definitely looks like it's worth riding, so if you're in the area, I'd recommend checking it out. Number 2, Hollywood Tour at Germany's Phantasialand. Though no longer operational, this ride will be forever remembered for its unintentionally horrifying visuals. Over the years, this ride pretty much rotted out from the inside, with the animatronics looking more and more diseased. Towards the start, there's another famous submechanophobic scene meant to resemble Jaws. This features a fisherman being attacked by sharks that sink his boat, sending him under the surface. Then the sharks go after the passengers, with the water damage clear from just looking at them. It's doubtful that these sharks were maintained during the end of the ride's run, if at all. But these guys were still disturbing when the ride first opened, with their unnatural appearance. Other disturbing visuals included this giant spider, with its hairy legs dipping into the water. But why the spider is in a western scene, I still don't know. After this was a Middle Eastern scene with diseased-looking camels that looked like they had some kind of radiation poisoning. Not to mention the robotic, unnatural movements of the people in this scene. Things didn't get better with this Tarzan scene, where it looks like his arm is about to fall off, along with this water-skiing ape's face. Then there was a Wizard of Oz scene, where Glinda is apparently possessed by Pazuzu. At last, there was submechanophobic King Kong, who sat in the water attacking a police boat. This guy aged perhaps the worst of all, with his flesh looking nasty. He was also missing patches of hair, and his decayed looking hand and fingers were like something straight out of a nightmare. This whole ride looked like it stank, literally. Many have stated that this ride smelled horrible, apparently because of mold. And after years of decay, the ride was shut down in 2020. Interestingly enough, photos of its demolition were later leaked online from an unknown source, and they really are something. Moving on. Number 1. Brer Rabbit's Burrow at Wales Oakwood Theme Park. Much like Tales of the Okefenokee, this ride was also based on the works of Joel Chandler Harris, except not really. This ride had about as much to do with the original stories as Dragon Ball Evolution had to do with the original anime, though unlike that movie, this ride was enjoyable, albeit unintentionally. Originally, this ride was known as Nutty Jake's Gold Mine, but in 1999, it was closed down and replaced with Brer Rabbit's Burrow 2 years later. The new ride went as followed. Instead of the laughing place, you're invited to Brer Rabbit's happening place for a quote-unquote rap party. Because how do you do, fellow teens? Fittingly enough, after entering the burrow, you start off in the bathroom. On the left was a rabbit taking a bubble bath, while on the right you saw and heard Brer Rabbit fighting for his life on the toilet bowl. Interestingly enough, this scene later became a submechanophobic icon, yes, another one in this video, as the bathing rabbit animatronic was apparently not designed to be submerged in water. The water itself became filthy looking over time, although the uploader of this video said it didn't smell as bad as many people thought. That scene aside, the ride as a whole had a claustrophobic, confined atmosphere with limited lighting. Its original mine scenario was fitting of this feeling, but on something that's supposed to be a whimsical ride, it added an uneasy feeling to the whole thing. Throughout the course, there were several dead-eyed rabbits preparing for and having a house party. They had pillow fights, breakdanced, and there was even a scene where they got drunk. Please drink responsibly. Over time, this ride got more and more neglected. After a while, many of these scenes had no music, with only the sounds of the mechanics being heard in several scenes. Now just imagine getting stuck on this ride during a power outage. Talk about a real-life creepypasta. After years of terrifying the public and getting negative reviews online, this ride was closed down in 2013 to make room for a Roald Dahl themed area. An area they apparently didn't bother getting permission from Roald Dahl's estate to open, so they were apparently forced to remove all references to the author's work. Now that's one hell of an epic fail. Hey everyone, it's Peter from Theme Park Crazy, and I have a bit of a different video today. As you might know from looking at my community tab, I'm planning yet another dark rides video, this time on bizarre dark rides. Last time we talked about disturbing dark rides, but these dark rides are less disturbing and more of, what is this? What's going on? That kind of thing. Now that doesn't mean there won't be any disturbing rides on this list. I've come to find out since my last video that I greatly underestimated the amount of dark rides out there, especially weird dark rides. Honestly, some of the rides I found that people have told me about make the Mine of Lost Souls at Canopy Lake Park look completely sane by comparison. Now, of course, like with all my videos, I posted a link to a poll where viewers can vote to determine the ordering of my top 20 strangest dark rides video. However, there's a bit of a problem with that. After I initially posted the link to that poll, I found out about even more strange dark rides out there. And so I didn't get to add them when I first started polling people, so naturally they're a bit behind. And also, some of these dark rides I've heard about are really, really obscure. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if like 99% of my audience never heard of them before. So what I want to do with this video is introduce you to some of these really obscure dark rides, and also include a link to my poll in the description so you can decide if any of these dark rides qualify for this list I'm making, and how strange they are compared to the other selections. So with that said, I'm going to start off this video with what the thumbnail advertised. Now this first ride, I'm not sure exactly what the name is. One video suggested the name was Prehistoric River, and that was from the park, so I'll just go with that. So this first ride is Prehistoric River at Dam Sen Park in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam. Now there are a lot of dinosaur-themed rides out there. Take for example Jurassic Park River Adventure at Islands of Adventure. There's also the more infamous Jurassic Jungle Boat Ride in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. Now I've discussed that ride and its disturbing nature multiple times before, but somehow Prehistoric River manages to be even more messed up. Now you start off by boarding a boat, and the first thing you'll notice is that these dinosaur animatronics look like no other dinosaur animatronics that I've personally seen. A lot of them are covered in fluorescent paint. Some of them also have what look like human teeth where their lips are supposed to be. And a lot of them have LED lights built into them. For example, there's this iguanodon with flashing human eyes that are unblinking, and it has just human teeth in its mouth, and it's just like complete nightmare fuel. I've seen videos of children screaming in terror at these animatronics. And really, the only thing these animatronics really do is move their head left to right and snap their jaws, and that's it. And here's the thing about this. Some of these animatronics get so close to the boat that you could actually easily reach out and touch them. There are videos of people just reaching their hand up and petting them because whoever designed this ride made the animatronics way too close to the boat. And in some footage you can see that some parts of these dinosaurs are made out of foam. You can actually see foam, like bits of foam dangling off of the dinosaurs where people have reached out and touched them and probably ripped the foam. And even though some of the dinosaurs are out of reach, you can still see big chunks ripped out of them, and you can see the mechanics through the rips in the foam and rubber. Now, aside from the animatronics, there are moments on this ride where just random props swing out and actually come in contact with the passengers. There's a jellyfish and a fluorescent tiki head with tentacles, I guess. And there's also this big plush spider that you can literally touch. It literally goes right in front of the boat's path. Honestly, if I were on that boat and I didn't know that was coming, I would die of a heart attack. As you can see here, the mechanism to raise and lower the spider is broken, so it's just kind of hanging there, and the guests actually have to push it out of the way. And it's like, get your butt out of my face, dude. Now, the strangest part of this ride, by far, is the lighting. It's just constantly flashing red and blue and green over and over and over again. And as a result, it's really hard to tell what's going on here. There are parts of the ride that don't constantly flash between colors, but the lighting is so harsh, it's like some kind of psychedelic dream. Think about Land Before Time meets Pineapple Express. In fact, I was thinking about this ride today while I was on a walk, and I decided that if I were to take control of this ride, I would, just for fun, theme it to the Land Before Time and call it Littlefoot's Scary Dream Simulator, or LSD Simulator for short, because I think it would be very fitting. Next, I want to talk about Dreamyland. This was a ride that operated at the Trafford Centre in Manchester, England. And again, I don't know if I pronounced Trafford right. Even though I do speak English, I am terrible at a lot of British words. Like, when I see this, I see the River Thames, but no, it's pronounced the River Thames. And to me, I was born in Derby, Connecticut, so when I see this, I think it's called Derbyshire. But no, it's Derbyshire. So if I pronounced Trafford wrong, I apologize. So this ride, for a long time, was lost media. That was until YouTuber Lauren Hardy decided to actually reach out to the ride's designer and get some footage that the ride designer had. Now, the ride's designer, Miranda Ricks, was kind enough to allow me to use this footage as well. So I want to give a big shout out to her. Thank you so much. I will thank you again in my upcoming Dark Rides video too. But this ride was pretty much a strange combination of like the Teletubbies and In the Night Garden. Basically, this was a shooting dark ride where you shot targets and tried to protect the Dreamies, whose job it is to make happy thoughts and good dreams and all of that fluffy stuff. Now, on this ride, the Dreamies are being threatened by the Nightmares, and your job is to shoot the Nightmares. And, sorry, I just find it hilarious that this ride, which basically is very cute and wholesome and whimsical, your job is to literally shoot the villains. And this ride is really a trip. You've got these cartoony characters, you've got these colorful set designs, and you've got this character who's wearing this Zoolander-type outfit that I'm pretty sure would be a one-way ticket to fashion jail. And the whole vibe of this ride is, whoa, look at the colors, man. And I really gotta give it credit. It's very unique, that it's clear that a lot of time and effort went into it. And I want to iterate that just because a ride is bizarre and just because it makes the list, that doesn't mean it's a bad ride. Far from it. Miranda Ricks and her team did an amazing job with this ride, and I'm honestly shocked that it's been lost media for so long. So there's really nothing disturbing here. Again, this is why I made the disturbing Dark Rides video separate. Well, I guess there is one thing that's disturbing, and that's this snake with like a baby's face with fangs. This is a creepy little guy. And you might think that this giant mutant carrot is creepy, but I disagree. I think he's an adorable little doof. Sorry. Honestly, I'm really glad that such high quality footage of this ride exists. And hopefully it will make the top 20 for my next video. And if not, I want to give this ride its own video in the future, because it has a very interesting history and development. Moving on, I want to talk about Alton Towers next. Now, if you live in the UK and you're a longtime fan of Alton Towers, you probably have heard of this ride. But believe it or not, I haven't heard about this ride until very recently, and there's a good chance that a lot of people outside of the UK haven't ever heard of this ride, and it's really too bad, because this ride is weird, but in the best way. This is called Toyland Tours, and it's pretty much the textbook definition of whimsical. So basically, you get on this boat and you're taken through this magical, mystical toyland with all of these giant toys and some extremely creative visuals too. For example, you have a bouncy castle making section where the castles are literally bouncing up and down. Then you have this area, which is basically like snail race car driving. They predicted that movie from DreamWorks. Oh yeah, it was called Turbo. Then you've got bath toys, teddy bears, trains, desserts. Oh, and you've got a guest appearance from Sonic the Hedgehog. Yep, there's Sonic right there, and you could see some Sonic gameplay footage right above him. So before the days of Sonic Spinball, this was Sonic's first introduction to Alton Towers. Now the fourth ride I want to discuss is actually one that was considered for my disturbing dark rides video, but didn't make the cut. And this is Fantasy Dream at South Korea's Lotte World. Now, Lotte World is probably the most famous theme park in South Korea, but this ride is often not talked about, at least in the West. Now, from start to finish, this ride is really a trip. So you start off by entering through a clown's mouth, and then there's a bunch of candy, and after a rainbow light-up tunnel, the first thing you see is a bunch of colored orbs and this giant animatronic bearded man reaching out towards you. Not gonna lie, it's kind of unsettling having a giant human figure just in the semi-darkness like that. Then it kind of takes an Alice in Wonderland turn with a bunch of flowers with faces. And also there's what appears to be a talking forest of candy. Then you're inside of a candy castle where the walls and ceiling are literally covered with jelly beans. For some reason there's a wizard here, and I'll be sure to look up why. Then, after what looks like a candy carnival, you come across this dragon who I assume stuffed himself eating the wall. Honestly, this ride is definitely a weird one, and I'd be shocked if it didn't reach the top 20. Finally, there's this ride at Austria's Wiener Prater called Iceberg. First of all, what's up with the polar bears? They look creepy. Second, this ride has a scene where there's 3 baby penguins and all of a sudden they're singing, "I like to move it, move it." Then there are these penguins that are spinning around to that song Right Round by Flo Rida and Kesha. Then there's a penguin that apparently flashes you. And finally there's this. I can't show this, but I'll put a link in the description. The best part is that during the Halloween season they have live actors there. One year they had a killer polar bear that chased you down. And by the way, that is the Red Coaster channel in that polar bear costume, who also provided this footage. So thank you very much, Killer Polar Bear. All of that said, there's still a lot more rides on the list. These are just the ones that I felt were the more obscure ones, and I wanted to give every ride on the list a fair shot. So click on the Google Forms link in the description to vote, and I'll include a playlist of a bunch of these rides videos. All of that said, this is Theme Park Crazy, and I'll see you soon. Dark rides are one of the cornerstones of a theme park's lineup. From family fare to haunted houses, there's no shortage of variety with them. But what about the dark rides that are just plain weird? For this video, we're going to take a look at some of the most bizarre dark rides that will leave you dumbfounded. Some of these dark rides are head-scratching, while others are flat-out hair-raising. Anyway, as voted on by the viewers, here are the top 20 most bizarre dark rides ever built. Number 20, Reese's Extreme Cup Challenge at Pennsylvania's Hershey Park. Designed by the world-famous Sally Corporation, this shooting dark ride was the most 90s ride to ever open in 2006. You may be thinking, what on earth do Reese's Cups have to do with extreme sports? Well, believe it or not, this ride has a story behind it. And it really is something. The backstory centers on 2 sports commentators for the Reese's Sports Network, Sonny Pulaski and Kip Callahan. Sonny was a world-famous surfer who attributed his success to eating heaping spoonfuls of peanut butter. Meanwhile, Kip was a famous football player who attributed his success to eating a Hershey's bar before every game. Later on, Kip's snowboarder son Zach and Sonny's inline skater daughter Skylar would have success of their own. Sonny would attribute his daughter's success to peanut butter, while Kip attributed his son's success to chocolate. This caused a contentious debate between the commentators and sports fans over whether chocolate or peanut butter was better. The rivalry got so heated that Zach and Skylar had to stop their fathers from strangling each other on live TV. They did this by introducing them to the Reese's Cup, proving that chocolate and peanut butter can get along. Soon, a new friendly competition was started to celebrate the friendship between chocolate and peanut butter, and this competition was the setting of the ride. Equipped with light guns, passengers boarded one of two different ride cars, chocolate lovers and peanut butter lovers. Each vehicle had one of each car. Guests attempted to shoot as many targets as possible in several extreme sports settings. You had surfers riding waves of peanut butter, inline skaters flipping around on walls of Reese's Pieces, and base jumpers with Reese's Cup parachutes. For the most part, the athletes are 2D cutouts, though there are a few animatronics thrown in as well, including Kip and Sunny. At the end of the ride, a scoreboard tallied the totals from the peanut butter and chocolate lovers. As the years went on, the ride was considered to be outdated by some, while others considered it to be an all-time classic. Either way, the Extreme Cup Challenge would close in 2018 to make room for a new dark ride, Reese's Cup Fusion. Some riders enjoy the new technology, while others say the Extreme Cup Challenge was much more iconic. Feel free to comment down below which one you like better. Number 19. Shrek's Merry Fairy Tale Journey at the United Arab Emirates Motion Gate Dubai. Yeah, I'm well aware of the memes. Shrek is love, Shrek is life, and all that jazz. But no amount of disturbing internet content can take away from how iconic the series is. From unforgettable animated films to the third film we wish we could forget, this ogre has become a worldwide sensation. And when it comes to theme parks, there are plenty of Shrek-themed attractions all over the world. In early 2017, another Shrek ride opened to the public as part of the recently opened Motion Gate Dubai. You may be wondering how a ride based on Shrek can be bizarre enough to make this list. Well, it's all in the presentation. As it turned out, the story of this ride is that Shrek and Fiona are telling their children the story of the first movie with a puppet show. And this puppet show is pretty much the whole ride. All of the characters are portrayed by giant wooden-like puppets. Even Pinocchio. Shocking, I know. But why exactly are all of the characters puppets? Well, this is just speculation, but it is admittedly pretty funny. Many say that the reason that the characters are wooden puppets is that Motion Gate officials couldn't afford more advanced animatronics. So they decided to use the puppet show scenario as an excuse to give the characters as limited movement as possible. If true, this is admittedly a pretty clever way to cover up the park's limitations, though it couldn't be more obvious. Number 18. Monster Mansion at Six Flags Over Georgia. In my Disturbing Dark Rides video, we talked about Tales from the Okefenokee. With its possessed bears, psychotic rabbits, and yassified carrots, this ride is well remembered to this day. Though it closed for good in 1980, its replacement was arguably even better than the original. Originally known as Monster Plantation, this ride focuses on a friendly group of monsters inviting guests for a picnic. At first, this ride plays out like a lighthearted Jim Henson movie, with several friendly, fuzzy monsters enjoying the day and having fun. Most of them are just flat out adorable, though this one named Missy Scarlet is pretty unsettling. The overall atmosphere is fun, lively, and colorful. Still though, during this section, you're repeatedly told to stay out of the marsh. About halfway through, your boat takes a wrong turn, sending you into a much less friendly area. Imagine taking a wrong turn on Sesame Street and ending up in the Dark Crystal. You won't find the Skeksis here, but you will find a pig troll with a giant club. I don't know what his name is, but for now, I'll just call him Señor Chicharrón. Then there are these villainous looking guys with really long snoots. You know, the designs of the evil monsters are really interesting, and I'd love to learn more about the lore of this ride. After being menaced, you're saved by Billy Bob Fritter, and yes, that is his name, when he fires off a cannon and scares the evil monsters away. The atmosphere then switches back to lighthearted. Or does it? Believe it or not, this ride actually has a bad ending. At the end, your boat will be swallowed up by a giant monster with sharp teeth and horns. And that's the end of the ride. Yep, you're eaten alive and presumably die. I don't know about you, but at my old school, we were never allowed to end up in the toilet. Number 17. The Adventures of Dreamyland at England's Trafford Centre. For many years, this ride was considered to be lost media, with no footage of it available to the public for a while. But just recently, YouTube user Lauren Hardy managed to reach out to the ride's designer Miranda Ricks, who provided her with some archive footage. She was also kind enough to let me use this footage as well, so a special thank you to Miranda Ricks. Also, thank you to Lauren Hardy for finding this footage and introducing me to this ride. I'll link her video about the ride in the description. Rather than a theme park, this ride operated as a standalone attraction at Manchester's Trafford Centre Mall. This strange ride centered on a species of CBeebies looking characters named the Dreamies, who are responsible for creating happy thoughts and good dreams. Meanwhile, the Dream Guzzlers, led by the evil Queen Gazella, want to capture the Dreamies, presumably to eat their dreams like cheesecake. To stop the Dream Guzzlers, passengers boarded 4-person carts equipped with light guns known as Guzzler torches. Basically, the goal of this whimsical dark ride was to shoot the villains to turn them good again. Along the course was colorful, creative imagery, with settings like lands of candy, a spooky forest, and outer space. Some of the highlights include a vampire dream guzzler, a guzzler menacingly emerging from a hole wearing a sombrero, and a giant mutant carrot that's honestly an adorable little doof. Perhaps the creepiest character, besides the fashion disaster queen, is this fuzzy snake with what looks like a baby's face. Sadly, this ride closed after just a few years due to low attendance. But honestly, for a dark ride with an entirely original IP not attached to any major theme park, it's clear that a lot of time and effort went into it. So major kudos to Miranda Ricks. Number 16, Fantasy Dream at South Korea's Lotte World. This trippy train ride exists at one of South Korea's premier theme park destinations. To start off, guests board a train and enter a course through a clown's mouth. After some candy and a psychedelic rainbow tunnel, you'll get a rather unsettling scene of a giant animatronic of a bearded man in the semi-darkness, surrounded by colorful orbs. Then you'll enter an Alice in Wonderland type setting of talking flowers, along with giant singing lollipops and candy canes. This is followed by a giant mushroom forest with musical insects, more singing candy canes, and a gingerbread house village with cats and dogs. Another clown's mouth will take you into a candy castle, with walls lined with jelly beans, rabbit trumpet players, and giant pieces of cake. On your left, you'll see a wizard who happens to be a fox. Then out of nowhere, you'll exit the castle and enter what looks like a haunted village where cute little smiley face ghosts move up and down in the background. For the grand finale, you're met with a candy carnival and a dragon who apparently stuffed himself eating the chocolate wall. Try as I might, I could not find any context for this ride, and I honestly have no idea what's going on. But then again, that's the case with most dreams, so it certainly does live up to the title. If you have any information on this ride's backstory, I'd love to hear it. Number 15, Adventures Through Inner Space at California's Disneyland. This dark ride was way ahead of its time. Back in 1967, Disneyland opened an all-new dark ride experience in Tomorrowland. This dark ride offered guests an unusual journey that shrank them to the size of an atom, taking them to the center of a snowflake. Visitors would queue up beside the mighty microscope, a towering device that seemed to shrink people before their eyes, though these were actually miniature models. After boarding Atomobiles, guests ventured inside the mighty microscope. Inside, the Atomobiles took riders through a mesmerizing dreamscape. As the ride went on, guests got smaller and smaller. They went from walls of ice crystals to enormous water molecules, and finally, the blinking red nucleus of the atom itself. Towards the end, guests also encountered a giant eye peering back at them through a microscope. Despite its mesmerizing visuals and innovative concept, the ride's popularity did wane over the years. By the mid-1980s, Monsanto, the original sponsor, had pulled out, prompting Disney to replace the attraction with the iconic Star Tours. Though Star Tours has become a guest favorite, the bizarre and beloved Adventures Through Inner Space remains fondly remembered. Number 14, The Old Mill at New York's Playland. If you can't get enough gnomes, this ride is for you. First opening in 1929, this ride was given a makeover by Sally Dark Rides in the early 2000s. At a cost of $2.7 million and 2 years of renovations, this ride takes guests into the Playland Waterworks and Crystal Mine. Here, there are a bunch of jolly gnomes at work, both in the mine and at the pumps. These animatronics somehow manage to be both creepy and cute at the same time. It's hard to put into words. Just like Monster Mansion, things take a dark turn as you enter the point of no return. Here, you'll enter a society of evil trolls who attempt to murder guests by chopping a tree down on them, sticking a giant dragon on them, and by using Bart's log trap from The Simpsons.
Kids have been doing that one since my day.
Eventually, you are rescued and make it out alive, but what's really strange about this ride is not what happens in the story, but what doesn't happen. At several points on this ride, the scenes are separated by long, liminal space corridors with only a green neon light lighting the way. In the traditional Old Mill fashion, this part could give guests some alone time, with the perfect opportunity to make out and possibly do other things involving their mouths. However, for legal reasons, I highly advise against doing that. Instead, perhaps you can have some time to think about the most pressing questions in life, like whether chocolate or peanut butter is better. Number 13. The Gremlins rides at Warner Bros. Movie World in Australia and Germany. The second Gremlins movie was a fourth wall breaking piece of cinematic chaos that is widely praised by audiences today. And the same goes for these two dark rides. Yes, two. One named Gremlins Invasion at Warner Bros. Movie World in Germany, and the other named Warner Bros. Classics and the Great Gremlin Adventure at Warner Bros. Movie World in Queensland, Australia. Now that's a mouthful. Let's start with the one in Australia. The story of this ride sees guests attending a screening of bloopers from various Warner Bros. Movies. But after the screening is interrupted by the Gremlins, guests are told to evacuate the theater via the ride vehicles. Passengers are then taken through the Warner Bros. Film archive with over 6,000 film reels. Naturally, the Gremlins are running around wreaking havoc and messing up the place, pretty much destroying all of the films they can find. You have to admit, this is a bit of an over-the-top way for Warner Bros. To get a tax write-off. Throughout this madness, there's also a special guest appearance from Beetlejuice, who helps guests in their escape. There's no real explanation, Beetlejuice just exists. A few years later, the German version opened in 1996. This ride as a whole was pretty much the same, but instead of Beetlejuice, this version guest starred, get this, Alf. Yes, Gordon Shumway himself. Something about the sight of Alf interacting with the Gremlins is truly something you'll only see once in a lifetime. There's even a short film in the pre-show where the Gremlins attack him. And at the end of the ride, Alf electrocutes the Gremlins. Damn! Unfortunately, the Australian version of the ride closed in 2001, with the German version closing 3 years later. The German version was replaced with the Van Helsing's Factory roller coaster, while Australia's version was replaced with Scooby-Doo's Spooky Coaster. Let's be honest though, neither of these rides come close to how strange an Alf Gremlins crossover was. Number 12. Nights in White Satin at South Carolina's Hard Rock Park. You may not have heard of Hard Rock Park, and who can blame you? This music-themed park just briefly operated in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina between 2008 and 2009. Among its attractions were a roller coaster named Led Zeppelin The Ride, a family coaster themed to the Eagles, and a dark ride named Nights in White Satin. This ride was based on the song of the same name by English rock band The Moody Blues. Believe it or not, this ride was widely praised at the time of its opening. Blending onboard audio of the song with psychedelic special effects, this ride perfectly visualized the song's mood. In one of the first scenes, a group of trees turn from dark to multicolored through the use of a blacklight effect. The rest of the ride is a mesmerizing series of lighting effects, disco balls, surreal projections, and even pumped-in scents. The full name of this ride is Nights in White Satin, The Trip, and that last word is pretty much an understatement. This ride was truly the ultimate 1960s rock experience, and it was arguably the best ride in the whole park. Unfortunately, Hard Rock Park was swamped in legal issues and suffered greatly from poor attendance in its opening year. After all, it literally opened during a recession. Less than a year after Nights in White Satin opened, the park went bankrupt and new management took over. The new owners attempted to drive attendance by making the park more family-oriented. So they dropped the Hard Rock name in favor of the name Freestyle Music Park. Nights in White Satin was replaced with the craptastic Monstars of Rock, a complete disaster that really deserves its own video. Of course, the park ended up closing around a year after it opened, but Nights in White Satin continues to be a cult classic among dark ride fans. Number 11. Area 51 Top Secret at Movie Park, Germany. This fan-favorite dark ride is another one at Movie Park, Germany, but is thankfully still in operation. According to the backstory, the US government wants to clear up rumors about aliens at Area 51. So to do so, they offer the public boat rides through the facility on Groom Lake in Nevada. Which is funny because Groom Lake is actually more of a salt flat than an actual lake, but suspension of disbelief. However, instead of proving that aliens don't exist, guests come in contact with a secret base of alien cyborgs. These robotic figures are controlled by what look like organic brains, and apparently capture and study humans in tubes. After observing the aliens doing research and working the machines, the whole thing ends with a refreshing splashdown in the Nevada desert. Now you may think it's odd having a boat ride take place in such a location, but actually that wasn't the original theme of this ride. When it first opened, this ride was actually named Bermuda Triangle, and it took place in the Atlantic Ocean. The mountainous facade was originally supposed to be a volcano, which also doesn't make sense because there are no volcanoes in the Bermuda Triangle. However, there are mountains near Area 51, so this ride has a continued tradition of its setting making half sense. Wrap your head around that. Just like Gremlins Invasion, there was also a near-exact copy of this ride in Australia, though this time it was at SeaWorld. That ride has since been replaced by Storm Coaster, but Area 51 in Germany continues to delight with its classic and strange dark ride excitement. Number 10. Wacky Factory at Georgia's Lake Winnipesaukee, or Lake Winnie for short. Now this is where we really get into the weird rides. Passengers start off by making their way through a passage of colorful arches and circles. At the end, a creepy elderly woman sits on a throne of rocks, when suddenly a fused two-headed man jump scares you from behind her. Then you make your way into the colorful factory, where you're greeted by a giant mutant bat and a demonic tree. Then you enter what looks like a room lined with aluminum foil, with various figures and, oh hey Leatherface, what brings you to Georgia? The colorful lighting is reflected off the walls, making for a dazzling visual experience. At the end of a hallway lined with what looks like the carpet of a bowling alley, is a giant clown head looking down at you. Afterwards, a spiral tunnel takes you into a room of illusions, with a green skeleton and various random imagery. Then after going past a few pirate ship wheels and a door with a face, the ride ends. This ride will certainly leave you with a lot of questions. What does this factory make? Why do all of the figures look like they were bought at Spirit Halloween? What kind of brownies were the designers eating? Not even Lake Winnie's website gives any real explanations. Truly one of America's most baffling dark rides. Number 9. Donkey Sherry at Japan's Shima, Spain Village. Some things just naturally go together. Peanut butter and jelly, cheese and fries, asses and wine. Yep, this ride is indeed all about asses. Donkeys to be exact. This ride was originally built at Shima, Spain Village in Japan's coastal city of Shima. As its name implies, this park is entirely themed to the country of Spain, going all out to make you feel like you're in a traditional Spanish town. This park is home to a number of attractions and roller coasters, but at one point it was also home to a dark ride named Donkey Sherry. Spain is world famous for its wineries, and the Catalan region does have its own breed of donkey. So at some point, it's likely that designers thought to combine the two, and the result is among the most bizarre Asian dark rides of all time. Photos and video of this ride are extremely rare, but YouTuber David Cobb was kind enough to allow me to use his footage, so special thanks to him. As for the ride itself, it's pretty much exactly what the title implies, with various scenes of donkeys making and enjoying Spanish wine. They even have a dance party, which predated the ending of almost every animated kids film. But not everything is cheerful, as there's also some disturbing moments. In one scene, guests are jump scared by a bat flying above. Then, donkey conquistadors show up and burn the village to the ground, along with this giant terrifying donkey animatronic.
Boy, that escalated quickly.
Thankfully, this ride does have a happy ending, with several inebriated donkeys dancing on a boat, and at the end, you can see an ordinary donkey, implying that this was just all his dream. Honestly, this ride is so unhinged that you really have to respect it. I'm honestly shocked that it hasn't received more attention over the years. Right now, I'm gonna call on all dark ride fans to find as much information as they can on this ride. Number 8. Fairy Tale World at China's Suzhou Amusement Land. It's a Small World is a ride considered to be a classic by some and creepy by others. But no matter what your feelings of this ride are, it can't compare to the insanity of Fairy Tale World. In many ways, you can consider this ride to be a knockoff of the Disney attraction, as it directly copies many scenes from the original. It even has the famous song playing in the background, and as if that wasn't enough, it was originally named Small World. Now, if that's not being obvious, I don't know what is. But this ride is a lot more than just a knockoff, as it throws some grade A insanity into the mix. We have a giant cat with heterochromia, an orange dinosaur, a weasel popping out of a pine cone, I think, a giant squirrel in a tux and top hat, creepy knockoffs of Beauty and the Beast characters, Mannequin Peace, creepy-ass dolls, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, a Wish.com set of Wizard of Oz characters, a miniature set of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and finally, a giant uncanny animatronic of SpongeBob SquarePants. Suffice to say, there was absolutely no cohesion or consistency with this ride. Still though, I will give it credit for how much they managed to fit in. Unfortunately, this ride was recently closed down with the rest of the park in 2017. And it's a shame because its weirdness really is memorable. Number 7. Professor Burp's Bubbleworks at England's Chessington World of Adventures. This is perhaps the most cherished defunct dark ride in British history. First opening in 1990, this ride was created by famous theme park developer John Wardley. The concept centered around a whimsical soda factory run by Professor Burp. Guests boarded circular tubs and were taken on a waterway through the factory. There, they would watch how the professor's fizzy pop got made in a Willy Wonka-style scenario. Throughout the factory was surreal imagery that illustrated how the professor combined juice with gas. Several segments showed the juicing process, with fruits being juiced with badminton rackets, giant lemon reamers, and a juice jacuzzi for fruits to enjoy. Other elements focused on the gas. For example, there's this iconic visual of a floating cow being inflated. This was in order to make cream soda. Then there's a laughing gas segment where, no. Further down the course, you got to see the carbonation mixed into the juice in different ways, be it a hippo mixer or a mosquito mixer. Afterwards, there's this scene where the fizz content is being tested with, well, this. And who could forget the famous Beaufort scale? This is followed by a grand soda carnival and perhaps the most iconic portion of the ride, the fountain finale. This pair of water jet tunnels was undoubtedly memorable and is still remembered fondly by park fans. This ride is considered to be not just one of the greatest British dark rides, but one of the greatest dark rides of all time. Unfortunately, the same can't be said for its successor. In 2006, the park decided to greatly change the attraction to fit its new sponsor, the Imperial Leather Toiletries Company. The ride's name was then changed to Imperial Leather Bubbleworks. Instead of a soda factory, the ride's setting was changed to a soap factory. Lame. Many of the original scenes were removed and replaced with arguably inferior renditions featuring rubber ducks. The ride's theme song was also remixed to include constant quacking. The worst part was that all of these changes were made without the original designers involved, and John Wardley himself refused to ride the new version, saying he would cry if he did. To fans of the original, it would have been more respectful to rename the ride Dr. Fart's Fest, Taylor's version. Eventually, the Imperial Leather sponsorship was dropped, and the ride operated as a husk of its former self. In 2016, it was announced that the ride would close for good to make way for a new dark ride based on the Gruffalo. Fans of the ride were greatly disappointed and have a special hatred reserved for the Gruffalo. Still, others say the ride already died in 2006 and that this change was just putting it out of its misery. Number 6. Prehistoric River at Vietnam's Dam Sen Park. This is yet another boat ride, and if you thought Nights in White Satin was a trip, you ain't seen nothing yet. Located in Vietnam's Ho Chi Minh City, this ride takes passengers on a cruise through a jungle filled with dinosaurs. At first, a dinosaur boat ride doesn't sound like anything out of the ordinary, with Jurassic Park River Adventure and the infamous Jurassic Jungle boat ride already well known. But this ride outdoes both of them in the psycho factor. First of all, the lighting makes it difficult to tell what's happening around you, constantly flashing from red to green to blue. Even worse, the dinosaur animatronics are flat out bizarre. Some of them are covered in fluorescent paint, while others have LED lights built into them. Many of them have bright red mouths, while others have unblinking eyes that constantly flash different colors. Moreover, some of the animatronics have visible wear and tear on them, whether they have bits of foam dangling off or giant obvious holes in their skin revealing the mechanics inside. What's even more nightmarish is the fact that many of the animatronics are placed way too close to the boat, allowing passengers to easily reach out and touch them. This ride also has a few jump scares that are too close for comfort, such as this jellyfish, this tiki head with tentacles, and this spider with fluorescent spots and Christmas lights on it. In one video, you can see that the mechanism to raise and lower the spider was broken, so the guy filming the video had to push it out of the way. I don't know about you, but having to push a grimy plush spider's gyat out of my face doesn't sound very fun. Also, there's a random horse statue for some reason. Reportedly, this ride is still operational, so if you plan on going to Vietnam, you may want to check this out if you're curious. Number 5. Garfield's Nightmare at Pennsylvania's Kennywood. This attraction took passengers into the mind of Garfield. In addition to product placement, throughout the course were a number of strange visuals, going from one perilous scenario to another. First, after saying he never met an ice cream truck he didn't like, Garfield was chased down by an evil ice cream truck. Then, a mailman got revenge on Garfield by sicking a rabid dog on him. This was followed by Garfield whacking a spider, and a giant spider, once again, getting revenge on him. Afterwards, Garfield ate a goldfish, which, yet again, got revenge on Garfield by eating him alive. Definitely a lot of vengeance took place on this ride. After commenting on how he hated the vet's office, Garfield was seen tied up while a nurse pointed a syringe at passengers that blew air on them. Then, Garfield excitedly tackled the pizza delivery man, and this was followed by an evil pizza man delivering an evil pizza box. Do you think that was from Evil Domino's or Evil Little Caesars? I don't know, here in Connecticut we have much better evil pizza places. What came next was an odd scene. After simply remarking that he was going to the kitchen, a terrified Garfield was met with John bringing a hot dog to life like Frankenstein while Odie dressed up like Igor. When I first saw this, I thought that the sweater was supposed to be Odie's ripped out tongue, and it actually took me a while to get the Frankenfurter pun. Finally, Garfield remarked on how he had no interest in eating mice, but then the mice are preparing to eat Garfield anyway. Like, dude, he said he didn't want to eat you. This attraction was hated by pretty much all of Pittsburgh back in the day. After taking the place of the classic Old Mill ride, Garfield's Nightmare led to years of locals demanding the Old Mill to be brought back. And in 2020, that's exactly what the park did. Honestly though, I still wish I would have experienced Garfield's Nightmare for its strangeness alone. And hey, it did make the top 5 here, so it's good for something. Number 4. Meow Wolf's Kaleidoscape at Colorado's Elitch Gardens. From the creators of Omega Mart in Las Vegas comes another surreal art exhibit from the fine folks at Meow Wolf. In 2019, they opened Kaleidoscape, an immersive and interactive dark ride experience at Elitch Gardens. Honestly, it's going to be hard to explain this ride, as it's much more of a visual experience than something you can really explain in words. Like other rides on this list, your vehicles are equipped with light guns, and your goal is to shoot various targets on the ride to make parts of the scenery move. This ride has plenty of abstract settings to enjoy, such as a wireframe mountain range, a neon jungle setting, and a room with paper clips and a basketball hoop man and a cow skeleton, I think. Oh, and this terrifying antler demon. The fact that I'm having trouble explaining this ride is a testament to how unique it is. Every little prop is worth talking about, and honestly, I don't have time to give this ride justice here. Art doesn't have to be easily explained. Sometimes it can just be about the experience and how the visuals leave an impact on your mind. You can just tell that tons of love and artistic effort was put into the decor, and it's 100% worth checking out. Number 3. Vi på Saltkroken at Sweden's Astrid Lindgren's World. Also known as Life on Sea Crow Island in English, this ride was based on a Swedish television series from 1964. This story revolved around a widowed author and his 4 children getting into various mishaps and misadventures on the titular island. So in a very, very, very broad way, it's like a Swedish version of Full House. Now you may wonder how a ride based on a family-friendly sitcom made the list. Well, it's all in the animatronics. These figures are so unbelievably uncanny that it's honestly unsettling.
You're almost expecting the figures to suddenly jump out at you and reveal that they're live actors. Also, some of the expressions and movements are kind of unnerving as well. As high quality as the face sculpting is, the motions are pretty robotic, so it's an odd combination indeed. For example, here's a scene where the father gets attacked by a swarm of bees. And don't get me started on this baby. When I first saw this scene on my phone, I thought the red paint was blood. Admittedly, I know nothing about this show, and if you're from Sweden, feel free to tell me about it in the comments. But still, this ride does have a creepy atmosphere, especially when the scenes fade to black, leaving passengers in the dark. Despite how creepy it seems to me though, this ride was a big hit for the park, leading to an 18% increase in attendance for Astrid Lindgren's World. Now I just wonder what would happen if they opened a full house dark ride here. Number 2. Iceberg at Austria's Wiener Prater. Where do I even start with this one? First opening in 2010, this is one of the park's many dark rides, and it's easy to argue that it's the strangest. So this is another light gun dark ride, but instead of typical light guns, you have cameras to shoot the targets with. At the start, a creepy looking polar bear gets right in your face, welcoming you to his kingdom and allowing you to take photos. As the ride begins, the first thing you'll notice is the stock newsroom music. Take a listen.
Kamera schnappen, Leute. Hier ist schon das erste Viecherl.
Yes, this is the same music that's used in all of those bizarre Go Animate videos, and this music loops throughout the ride, so they must have honestly thought it fit the setting. In addition to extremely unsettling polar bears, there are a number of gags that come out of nowhere. For one thing, you've got these baby penguins who suddenly start singing "I like to move it, move it." Then there are these penguins who are spinning around to Right Round by Flo Rida and Kesha. Also, Who Let the Dogs Out suddenly plays when you see these sled dogs. And right before the sled dog scene is a scene with 2 Arctic foxes that I probably can't show, but I can play the audio. Check out the description for the uncensored scene. Soon enough, a seagull will take a dump on your head, with a burst of compressed air blown into your face to add to the effect. Suddenly, you're sent underwater, coming face to face with a giant meow wolf looking crab. Then you're swallowed whole by what looks like an orca with really inflamed gums, taking you through a glowing, rotating tunnel. After a diver and some colorful fish, you're suddenly at an undersea disco party, disco ball and all. Then the ride just ends, leaving you to wonder what the designers were on when they made it, because it definitely wasn't Planet Earth. This ride is certainly a strange one, and it's clear to see why it made it so far up the list. By the way, during the Halloween season, they used to have scare actors running around. Here's the uploader of this footage, the Red Coaster channel, in a killer polar bear costume. Now that's some grade A nightmare fuel, so special thanks to the killer polar bear for providing this footage. Number 1. Earthquake the Ride in Gatlinburg, Tennessee. Not only is Tennessee known for the infamous Jurassic Jungle boat ride, but just a short drive away is another dark ride reportedly run by the same owners. This ride is pretty much a knockoff of the classic Earthquake at Universal Studios parks, and is set up the same way. You board a subway and are taken on a short course, going forwards and backwards with no turns. But while both rides do have a similar setting, falling scenery, and a similar flood scene, Earthquake the Ride cranks the unhinged level up to 11. On this ride, you'll suddenly find yourself on an out-of-control subway, with the scenery and your vehicle shaking with the force of the earthquake. One of the first things that stands out is a gorilla in a wooden crate to your right. Who in their right mind would just leave a gorilla on the side of a subway track? What's this gorilla's backstory? Why is he here? What's his name? As if a literal earthquake wasn't dangerous enough, the ride designers add more hazards like alligators coming out of sewer pipes, rats defying gravity and running down the walls, and giant spiders on the ceiling. Towards the end, the gorilla escapes from his crate, looking like he's going to give passengers a backhanded slap across the face. Hell hath no fury like a slapping gorilla. At last, the ceiling will give way for a bunch of rats to pour in, and once you get back to the boarding station, you'll be jump scared by upside-down gorilla heads. This ride's balls-to-the-wall bizarre nature and its location in a popular tourist city made it easy to see why it made the number 1 spot on this list. Still though, you may disagree about the placements on this list, or maybe there are some other strange dark rides that I missed. If there's a dark ride you'd like me to talk about, feel free to leave a comment down below.